everybody, and welcome, and thank you very, very much for being here today. This is an impressive endeavor. I don't know how we're all doing it, but we have people from all over the country, and I believe even a couple of people from Israel, where it's 5 in the morning. So thank you very much for all being here. So what we're doing today, for those who don't know, is there are many schools across the country, obviously, and we can't get to all of them, but we are going to talk to dozens of individuals who are at different schools. So every school has one representative in this chat, and we got a very, very good cross-section. And everybody who's on here is fantastic and has been putting up with my messages for, in some cases, about a month and a half. So thank you very much. And we're going to now have a very weird, interesting, serious, and funny and wacky conversation. But first, we're going to play the game. The game is called Which University is the Most Anti-Semitic? Here we go. Have your pens and paper ready, and please let me know if this applies to you. All of these are statements that were provided from people in this chat. So all of these happened, and if nobody raises their hands or claps, I should say, to show that it was them, it means it's one of the people who had to cancel. All right, statement number one. On my campus, somebody told me that my inbred family in Israel should be killed. Isn't that lovely? Oh, and I see one person. 2 people. Okay, we already have 2 people. That's a lot of inbreeding for a small group chat. All right, very good. All right, keep score. So we only 2 people, not a lot, but I think 2 too many. Number 2, on my campus, there's a world map for everyone to feel included, but Israel was crossed off. Wow. 4 schools represented here. That's wonderful. Moving on away from the map question. On my campus, protesters at the encampment spat on my friend. I will accept it if they spat on you. I'll accept it if they spat on somebody you're not actually friends with. Encampment that spat on people. That is a lot of spit. Wow. That is a tremendous amount of spit. On my campus, there were people chanting from the river to the sea. All right, come on. This has got to be like the center square in bingo, right? Is there anybody who this isn't going to apply to? From the river to the sea, from chants? Wow. I'm seeing a couple of people this doesn't apply to. You guys are like in the like Pleasantville of schools. I mean, I just warn you, Pleasantville, the movie, turns south fast if you haven't seen it. All right, moving on. There's definitely people tuning in right now when they watch this, wondering why the hell we're making jokes about this. They're going to think this is actually the anti-Semitic chat, not the opposite. All right. On my campus, my friend's mezuzah was ripped off the doorpost and thrown down the hallway. About a half a dozen people know people whose mezuzahs were ripped off their doorpost. Pretty sickening. On my campus, Zionists were called white colonialists. Let's see. White colonialists come out of the woodwork. A lot of white colonialists on this chat, including some people who don't even identify as white, ironically. No, maybe they identify as colonialists, so, half right. This one, it's a little different. It's similar, but it's a little different. On my campus, my teacher said, these Jews, they're colonizers. So a teacher that referred to Jews as colonizers. Oh, boy. Bravo, the education system of today. On my campus, my teacher was caught on camera ripping down posters of the hostages. I will accept this if it's not your teacher, but you know of a teacher from the campus doing such a thing. Can't say I'm shocked Penn was one of the schools for that one. All right, moving on. On my campus, my own department officially stands against Israel and their genocidal war. 1 of you. No, 2, 3 of you. All right, good luck with that department. Moving on, we have, on my campus, my friends were called kikes as they walked by the encampments. How many people have been called kikes, or at least have had friends called kikes by the encampments? I'm going to speed up a little bit. So get ready with pressing those buttons so we can see and keep your score. On my campus, there have been hundreds of anti-Semitic incidents in this past year, per the school's president. Okay. Plenty of people. On my campus, someone drew SS symbols on a beach ball during a fair. Doesn't have to be a beach ball. SS symbols drawn publicly. Let's take that. There are a number of people. But it's a political statement, guys. It's not about being Jewish, right? On my campus, someone was suspended when they tested positive during COVID on Shabbat. They weren't able to leave and exit the dorm until Shabbat was over. They were suspended by the school. That was a pretty crazy statement. That had nothing to do with October 7th. That's just not accommodating religious freedom. On my campus, I was called out as a Zionist, as a bad word, while running for student government. Let's see how many people have been weaponized with Zionists that have run for student government. I love seeing some of you laughing, by the way. I'm appreciating those of you who look like they're having a good time. I'm trying not to depress anybody here. On my campus, this is a good one. On my campus, there was a Seder for Palestine by a so-called Jewish group. On all Hebrew letters were written backwards. They ate pizza, and it was in the last 2 days when Pesach/Passover was ending. I love that. Oh, yeah, there you go. Some of you are winning with crying laughter. I'm taking it. You're my people. Yes, these are terrible things, and yes, we are terrible people for laughing, but we Jews would not have lasted this long without laughter in our history. On my campus, our faculty have regularly justified October 7th as an act of resistance. Now I'm talking about faculty. Faculty. That's a lot of faculty. That is a lot of, okay. That is most of your faculty. On my campus, our student president called us privileged because we have a kosher kitchen. That kosher kitchen of yours makes you very privileged, few of you. On my campus, someone said he'd shoot me if I was still tabling when he got back in 20 minutes. Forget about the tabling. Has anybody been threatened to actually be shot? 2 of you have been threatened. 3 of you, 4 of you have been threatened to be shot. That is a straight up crime in every sense of the word, and we all know it. On my campus, if you speak Hebrew too loudly, you straight up get spit on. 3 of you are spit on for speaking Hebrew. On my campus, a Jewish student's door was lit on fire and burned down. Any of you know of any doors in your dorm rooms that were lit on fire? Arson. 1 of you. Yep, I'm glad that's not more than 1 of you. On my campus, I think a lot of you will have this. We had not 1, but 2 encampments. I will accept 2 or more. 2 or more encampments. Let's see, I'm really curious to see how many of you. That is most of you. Most of you had more than 1 encampment. On my campus, I had to drop a class due to an anti-Semitic TA. I will accept if it's an anti-Semitic teacher. So that affected you academically. On my campus, a class was actually canceled so people could attend the pro-Palestinian rally. I really am curious about this one. Classes canceled to accommodate the more people in the rally. That's a lot of people. Last question on this first round of Jeopardy, so to speak. On my campus, I was told to go back to Poland. Also acceptable alternative, go back to your grandparents' homeland. Okay, fair number of people. So out of curiosity, out of those, I don't know, I think that must be about 25 or so first statements I've given. Everybody, I would like you to write down in big letters on your paper how many you've got so far and hold it up. Let's get a sense so far. I'm seeing a fair number of double digits, which is alarming, considering that's almost half. On my campus, a female student went to an event where a former IDF soldier was speaking and a pro-Palestinian protester choked her. Choked her. Anybody here knows in their campus about being choked for going to an event? Pro-Israel event. Okay, I'm glad that's just 1 of you. Violent enough. 1 is too many. Moving on. On my campus, a professor publicly renounced and denounced his Judaism. Renouncing and denouncing your Judaism. Noah and Sammy and Nani. On my campus, our American flag was replaced by a Palestinian flag. Oh, isn't that lovely? How many of you have that happened to? Oh, a growing handful. Decent number. Isn't it interesting, of course, just how the Palestinian flag seems to go up over the American flag, but the American flag seems to always be up in the pro-Israel rallies. In my campus, I was called a dirty Zionist, and we're about to go through a few variations. Anybody here been a dirty Zionist? A lot of you, about half of you at least. All right. Put down those hands. What about a racist Jew? Who's been called that one? All right. And one more term. On my campus, I was called a Zio-Nazi. Zio-Nazi. Yeah. On my campus, my friend's mezuzah was stolen from his dorm. A little bit different than the other one where it was just ripped off and thrown down the hallway. Just stolen mezuzah. And a handful of you. On my campus, my friend was called anti-Semitic slurs just for wearing his kippah. And I will accept anything of anti-Semitic slurs for basically just for being identified as a Jew, nothing else. You were anti-Semitic slurs for being identified as a Jew. That's all that matters here. On my campus, hostage posters were ripped down multiple times. Oh boy, I think we might have found a new center square. All right, on my campus, we chalked the names of the hostages and they were immediately erased. Curious many campuses did the chalking, but that's very sad. Over at Alana's. On my campus, I was called a genocidal terrorist supporter. Wow. More of that than racist Jew even. Nothing ironic about that one. Genocidal terrorist supporter. All right. On my campus, I think this is going to be popular. Graduation was interrupted by protests. How many of your campuses, you didn't have to be at graduation, how many of the graduations were interrupted by protests? Guess ballparking, that's more than half of you. On my campus, the student government voted in favor of BDS. A lot. That looks like a lot. On my campus, I was told by another student that she was not supposed to engage with me because I'm a Zionist, so don't engage. On my campus, people called us baby killers. Baby killers. Okay. On my campus, every event we created, every event was disrupted by protesters. How many of yours, you just know there was not an event that wasn't interrupted by protesters? See Berkeley, he shot up there for it. And, oh, yep, I see over there Macaulay, which is part of Hofstra, right? Hunter. That's pretty crazy because that's a lot of events being interrupted. On my campus, I had to have a meeting with my department head about the anti-Zionist actions within the department. How many of you actually ended up having to deal with this and talk to your department heads about it? What was going on in the department? Okay, actually a fair number of you. I thought this might be one person. Not at all. Almost, Gideon says. All right, on my campus, there was an encampment that lasted for about a full month. I'll accept anything close enough to a month. Yeah, I don't know, about 5 of you. On my campus, the encampment followed and monitored Jews as they walked through the yard. This is actually, to me, one of the most disturbing ones, being stalked. Wow, even Princeton. My nephew Darius made it sound like Princeton was all wine and roses, but not that one. On my campus, during a lunch, a Jewish professor was called a Nazi. Doesn't have to be during lunch. Jewish professors being called Nazi. One person. Nope, not one person, 2, 3. On my campus, a large anti-Israel and anti-Jewish misinformation campaign was created to slander me when I ran for student government. Did any of you guys run for student government and have literally a slanderous anti-Jewish campaign as a result? and Gabriel, and Abby. Isn't that just lovely? UC Davis and Loyola, two California schools, have something to talk about. On my campus, people were explicitly supporting Hamas, explicitly chanting death to Zionists and glory to our martyrs. Oh, this is almost a center square. But guys, isn't it just, polite political discourse they were doing? No. Wow. I expected a fair number. I didn't expect that many for that one. On my campus, and this is the last one on this page, we're about to lose a lot of people. On my campus, we have begged the school leadership repeatedly to condemn the hatred against us with swift and meaningful actions, just as they do when faced with other forms of hate. We have begged them. A lot of your campuses have begged your faculty to do that, your administration. Yep. All right. Now, before we go to the final round of which school is the most anti-Semitic, let's get your tallies. Add yourselves up, because we're about to go to the final round, and it's going to go to the top three. It's going to go to the top three. So hold them up. It's going to be hard to see. Turn off your screens unless you are on the top three. Do all of you have 28 or 29? Okay, then it's top four. You're tied. All right, so here we go. Contestant number one is Sammy Shiff, coming in from Drexel University. Excuse me for sounding drunk. Contestant number two, Alana Goldman over at UNC Chapel Hill. Contestant number three is Jacob Rendler at UC San Diego, my wife's alma mater. And contestant number four, Gabriel Gaysinsky at UC Davis. Wow, we have two representatives from the UC school system. They should be so proud. I hope the regions are watching. All right, everybody. Are you ready for the final round to see which one of you guys? A lot's riding on this. I'm sure you're all really hoping your school is the most anti-Semitic. I mean, what else are you in this chat for, right? All right. And you know what? At this point, turn on your sound, guys. Turn on your sound. It's four of you. On my campus, your Muggin David gets torn off your neck by protesters. On my campus, protesters march through the classroom buildings and libraries, even while lessons and tests are taking place.
Oh, yeah, right here.
Okay, two of you and Jacob. All right, add to your tally. We're going to see. On my campus, I've been yelled at and called names because my friends and I were visibly Jewish.
Oh, yeah.
That's the basic one.
It seems like it's pretty basic. And Sam, okay, so that became a gimme. I thought it might be. All right, this is going to be pretty specific. On my campus, our Hillel house was vandalized. Our Hillel house was vandalized.
Yes.
Okay.
They don't know where it is or don't know it exists at UNC.
Oh, that's fair. Now I'm going to throw one in. It's the only one I'm throwing into this whole chat that I'm writing, but I feel like it's apt. On my campus, our Chabad house was vandalized. I'll just throw that in there. Any of you guys? No. All right. On my campus, a girl selling bracelets to raise funds for humanitarian aid in Israel was spit on. None of you four. Okay. On my campus, before October 7th, no one on a campus was speaking up about Israel or Palestine. But after the attack on Israel, before Israel responded, there were pro-Palestine marches almost weekly. Two of you, 50% of you started getting them. Love how people make it that it's all about Israel's response, and they pretend that they weren't already protesting before that. On my campus, a student called me a Nazi, a fascist, and a kike. Any of you get a nice trifecta, a little hat trick?
The different times, but it's
definitely Nazi and fascist, though.
Nazi and fascist.
Someone put on my sign, but not to me like directly.
If you get two of those three, I'll let you have the point. Nazi, fascist, kike. You get two of the three. On my campus, a student took a photo of me. This is a terrible one. Took a photo of me, created a flyer, put it all over campus with my face on it, falsely claiming that I said Palestinians are insects. Now, I'll accept it no matter what they say. They're putting your picture all over campus, slandering you as a Jew, as a Zionist type of thing.
Does Reddit work here?
Yeah, I would say publicly with your face. I would say, yeah. Pretty awful.
Kinda happened to my friend, but I don't think his face was in it.
Yeah, I'm gonna want the face there, you know.
Yeah.
I think that much. All right. Moving on. We're getting close to the end here. On my campus, I was recorded on video as a Zionist and received violent threats as a result. You were caught on video as a Zionist, got threats as a result. Okay. 2 of you, 4 of you. That is insane. On my campus, during a moment of silence for the Holocaust and October 7th victims, someone interrupted to scream about Gaza and apartheid. Not you 4. Okay. Thank God for small blessings. We've got 3 left, guys. Only a little bit of a chance to catch up if you're behind. On my campus, during a pro-Israel rally, someone took a picture of us, put it up on Snapchat with the caption, "Can someone shoot this shit up?" Yeah, that's a very specific one. It's not you for it. On my campus, during a painting competition, Students for Justice in Palestine, SJP, painted the outline of Israel, but made it entirely Palestine, erasing Israel. Oh, one of you did. We are down to our last question, guys, and then there will be no more. Our last statement is, on my campus, at one of the protests, they ripped the Israeli flag out of my friend's hand and ran away with it. Oh, Alana was able to score one from behind at the end. So here we go. Drum roll. I probably shouldn't have done that because it moved my camera. All right, let's see. What are we doing? Let's get your final scores. Why don't you go ahead and just tell me out loud. Let's see, starting with Gabriel. What is your number? Final tally.
31.
31? Okay. Alana, what is your final number?
33.
33. I'm not sure anyone will be able to beat that. Jacob, what is your final number?
35.
Oh! And finally, and I don't know the answers here, Sammy, what was your final number?
30.
Oh! So we have our winner, Jacob. You might want to take a bow. My wife's alma mater, UC San Diego. This is fantastic. I think, what is the Tritons? Is that what you guys were called? Oh, the Tritons. You should be very, very proud. Before you make your acceptance speech, I would like to introduce, and just for a moment, silence yourselves for just a moment, to introduce and to congratulate and to crown the victor of UC San Diego as the most anti-Semitic school. I would like to introduce my dear cousin, who is senior cantor of Beth Yeshurun, the largest conservative shul in all of North America, over in Texas, and I probably mispronounced the name of the temple. I'd like to introduce her to please crown Jacob and UCSD.
Since October, fear's been high, chanting slogans blind to hate, river to sea they state, lazy memes cut our dime, find the lies and cite the crime. Who's the worst? It is UC San Diego.
Bravo. Bravo.
My alma mater, UC Santa Barbara, would be very proud. I don't have an adjective for it.
All right. Well, I'd like to thank Cantor Rachel Goldman for joining our chat and making sure. Wait, what the hell is happening? Excuse me.
I'm so sorry. I'm like, is this the Rashida Tlaib jihad workshop?
This is not fucking okay. Guys, who gave out the link? Who gave out the link? I told you this was supposed to go to nobody else. Everybody mute your chat right now.
Zionists, genocide apologist, baby killing Zionists here. As far as the eye can see. Look at this motley crew.
How did you get this link? Who gave you this?
I spend a lot of time on Telegram. And let's just say we see all.
Oh my goodness. Lyle Culpepper, notorious best friend to such fantastic people as Mark Ruffalo and Susan Sarandon here on the chat. Are your buddies with you, Lyle?
Susan Sarandon. Former lover to Yahya Sinwar. Possible future lover to Yahya Sinwar as well, depending on circumstances. We can work things out.
Well, Lyle, since you crashed our chat anyway, do you have anything you'd like to say to these fantastic pro-Israel students who are coming from their campuses that you've been attending? Protests on?
Yeah. Clearly, these are kids that have not attended a single class in college because they would not be leaning in the particular political and ideological direction that they're leaning in if they had attended a single class in college, because that is not what we teach. As an adjunct professor, I know that is not the values that we espouse in our esteemed universities. So shame. You can't see, but I'm pointing to all your individual boxes right now. You've all been shamed.
All right, we're going to give it an opportunity to 3 people who want to ask or say something to Lyle. Whoever wants to do their little clapping thing and show me your first. Somebody wants to say something to Lyle. Go ahead. Gideon, I think Gideon can go first. What would you like to say to Lyle?
You in the back.
Hi, Lyle. Thank you so much for coming. Wondering if you could... Assalamu alaikum. Assalamu barakat. Wondering if you could describe briefly what it was like to be in a relationship with such a beautiful person like Yahya Sinwar. Did you feel inadequate in his presence? Is he as beautiful as he appears on TV? Does he smell as I think he does? Just wondering how he is.
Yeah, that's way more than 3 questions. Although I think it's 3. I think it's 1 question per. I will say that he is a puppy. He's like a puppy dog. He's not. People are, oh, Yahya Sinwar. No, he's not. He is a giant jelly roll. And you know what? He is sweet and he is kind and he's generous and he has a little bit of a temper, but I don't mind it. And he smells fantastic.
So you're shipping him is what I'm sensing, Lyle. You're shipping him.
Well, no, you would be shipping me and him.
Oh, you're right. I bookmarked that on my browser last night.
Someone did not brush up on their
I thought I was incognito browsing. Okay, I believe Sammy had his hand up pretty early. So Sammy, go ahead. Question.
Hey, my question is, first off, I love your content, but the question is, how do you get into this advocacy? How do you get into the advocacy when we decide you want to advocate?
How do I get into advocacy? You just have to go out and find a cause that people can relate to, whether or not it is a cause that you should be getting behind. So like my Uncle Frank used to say before he died in a publicity stunt for PETA, it's more important to be on the right side of history than to be right. And I think that's a value that we can all sort of relate to. It's not, you don't have to be right, but history has to side with you. So I think that's where we are right now. And so for all you potential advocates, I want you to take that with you on your next protest or the next time you go to beat up a Jew or something.
One of the many women on the chat who wants to ask a question here to Lyle. And by the way, I absolutely knew with certainty there'd be at least a couple of people on this chat who would have no idea who he is and be very confused right now. And I'm very curious who those people are. But in the meantime, all right. I believe Ada has raised her hand, but her camera is off. So Ada, you're going to need to turn on your camera and ask your question.
So at my school, there was somebody in the student newspaper that compared accusations that Hamas committed mass rape to white tears. And I'd like to know if you're in the habit of seeing or tasting white tears from Ashkenazi Jews, how they taste compared to waspy white people.
There is a little bit of a flavor difference between the white tears and the Ashkenazi tears. The Ashkenazi tears actually typically taste like gefilte fish because of the large amount of the gefilte fish that the Ashkenazis consume on a daily basis, and a little bit like Christian baby blood. But it's subtle. It's subtle. You need to have a refined palate to be able to really taste the difference.
Yeah, he's not wrong, I suppose. Can everybody who's has their cameras still off from the previous game remember your camera should be on now? There's a bunch of you that are still incognito. All right. I'm sorry that it's hard for me to know who was next, but Avram, go ahead.
So first off, I want to say that the Christian baby blood is our thing, so that's kind of appropriation for you to take that.
I didn't take it. I just have a refined palate, so I'm able to taste the rainbow.
Okay. So I wanted to ask if there was a difference. You're going about Ashkenazi tears. Do you find a difference also with like Mizrahi or Sephardic Jewish tears? I don't know if you've tasted those as well.
Are we just doing? Is this all tiers related? Can we ask?
Yeah, this is a tier list.
Like you want to just like make up something? Yeah, they taste different. They taste like arrogance and an ability to dance slightly better than the white tiers.
Okay, I would like.
Yeah. I'm gonna be putting a jihad on any more tiers related questions.
I believe Yuval raised his hand a few times from MIT and it kept disappearing. So Yuval, go ahead.
So on my campus, I was educated and informed that the war in Gaza is funded by the commerce and organs of murdered Palestinian children. And I wasn't able to understand where I get my share of Palestinian kidney money. And since you are so informed, I thought maybe you can help.
From what I've read, it's a similar system to during COVID when you were getting your government checks in. I think it's a similar form that you have to fill out, and then you just have to show proof of lack of foreskin. I don't know if it's a photo or an imprint that you have to do. And then for I actually don't know what the females do. Maybe you need to borrow a male friend's imprint or something. I don't know. I don't know the Zionist economics. The way the Zionist economics works. So
Lyle, I gotta know. Do you consider yourself an anti-Semite?
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
Oh, you do. Okay, you take it as a badge of honor. Okay.
Yeah.
That's good to know. Do you have any Jewish friends?
I had a dear friend named Jeffrey Epstein, who died in a tragic accident after being wrongly incarcerated.
I'm very sorry for your loss. I'm sure Harvey Feinstein was part of those missions. All right. I think we're going to go to just one last question, even though probably most people on this chat want this to be the literally next hour. But Alana, I'd like to hear from you.
Okay, so you just said that you're a very proud anti-Semite. Mm-hmm. A lot of your, I'm going to say comrades, for lack of better words, claim that they're not anti-Semitic. They're just anti-Zionist. So how do you feel about that when they, in public, deny that they're anti-Semitic? And furthermore, how do you feel when they accidentally say the quiet part out loud, like when they accidentally say Jew instead of Zionist?
Sure. So that was a what we call fall fashion, where we were doing the whole, no, we're not anti-Semitic, we're just anti-Zionist. We are well into the summer now, so we have turned a corner now where we're a bit more open with our feelings. And I think it's important that we let the Zionists know where we stand, so you know just how much fear you need to be in at all times. So yeah, we've changed the bylaws. The charter has been updated.
Hey, Lyle, I noticed your background is the Berenstein or Berenstein Bears, as people say. Don't you think that they might be a Jewish bear family, or no? I'm not sure.
No, and if they are, there are clearly some members of the family who are on the right side of history.
I see.
Deserve representation.
Yeah, the ones that had the Passover Seder. Very good. Well. Yeah. Lyle, I really don't thank you for crashing our chat. It's still very rude, whoever gave him the link, and I don't appreciate it. But I want
you're under false pretenses.
Yeah, exactly. Before you go, I'm just going to explain as you pass off the torch. Carly just entered the chat during the end, and I'm not sure she has any fucking clue what's happening right now.
Carly, I'm sorry. Is this Carly Rae Jepsen from Call Me Maybe?
One and the same.
Carly, do you have any idea what's happening right now, or are you just utterly confused?
I actually have an inkling of what is going on. It took me a minute, I will admit. It took me a minute, but I think I figured this one out.
So Carly is coming and
we got a real Nancy Drew in our midst here.
That's right.
To you.
She works for Stand With Us, and apparently Stand With Us keeps tabs on people like you, Lyle Culpepper.
Sweet, I made it on a list. For those of you who are not following me, follow me at Shut Up Lyle on Instagram and on X. And I wish you Zionists nothing but pain and disappointment.
Thank you very much.
Hasta luego.
All right. Well, thank you very much. We are back, and I would like to introduce somebody very special. I'm very appreciative of Stand With Us for partnering with me in this, along with Camera on Campus and Israel on Campus Coalition, and We Are Tov and End Jew Hatred, five wonderful organizations that officially did partner with us on Instagram to help. And Carly has been sent in from Stand With Us on the legal department, and I'm going to let her describe what she does and what types of things she can talk to you about and answer.
Thanks, Boaz, and thanks to all of you who are here taking some time out. I assume most of you are finished with studies for the time being. I hope so, for your sake. If not, good luck on the end of the semester. But hopefully we're far enough past that you're able to decompress a little bit. So as Boaz said, my name's Carly Gammill, and I am a member of the legal team at Stand With Us. I actually wear a couple of different hats. So I head up our Center for Combating Antisemitism, but then because of my background, I was a constitutional litigator for about 11 years. So I work as our director of legal strategy within the Side-Off Legal Department. If you're not familiar with Stand With Us and with our legal department, at this point, post October 7th, we had a couple of cases in the works before October 7th, but at this point, since then, we have around a dozen between Title VI complaints that we filed and actual federal lawsuits that we have filed based on the situation on campuses across the country. So we are heavily involved and invested in the legal aspects of the campus climate.
Carly, right, I'm gonna interrupt you because you brought up Title VI, and one of the very first question I was going to ask you was, explain to all of us, myself included, what the hell Title VI is that we read about so often, and talk to us like we were fourth graders.
All right, I can do that. So Title VI, I mentioned a moment ago that I litigated constitutional cases, right? So we understand that the supreme law of the land, right, is our federal constitution. Just below that, our Congress passes laws, right? And so Title VI is one of those federal laws that was passed actually in 1964 as part of a package, a Civil Rights Act. And the entire package addresses various aspects of discrimination and prohibits discrimination in a number of different contexts. Title VI specifically prohibits any recipient of federal funding. So if an institution, an entity of any kind receives funding from the federal government, it is prohibited from discriminating on the basis of race, color, or national origin. So the next question that you're probably going to ask yourself is, well, Jews are not actually a race. I didn't hear anything about religion in there. We're not a color. We're not actually a national origin. How in the heck do we get protected by Title VI? The answer to that is it falls within the national origin category. It is a long-standing understanding of the federal government, and in particular, the Department of Education, that national origin includes shared ancestry. And so that is how groups like Jews, Muslims, Sikhs, who normally people think of as having a shared religion, but who also have a shared ancestry aspect to their identity, they get protection under Title VI. And so what that means, and practically speaking, 99.9% of the higher education institutions in our country receive federal funding, whether they are public institutions or private institutions. If that is the case for your institution, and if you're on this call, you are almost assuredly in that camp, right? So your institution receives federal funding. That means it cannot permit discrimination against Jews. That's what it means for you, or Israelis. And so if you happen to be one or both, then you're protected by Title VI. And so if there is harassment or discrimination that is happening, right, on the basis of some aspect of your Jewish or Israeli identity, first, the institution's administration has to know about it, right? They have, if we're going to expect them to do something, they have to know about it. Once they know about it, they are required to take whatever steps are reasonably necessary to remedy that anti-Semitic environment. And so again, just the language, if you want to kind of get into the nitty-gritty, the language is that there has to be a pervasively hostile environment, which is why we don't go filing Title VI complaints every time some form of anti-Semitism crops up on a campus. Suffice it to say, on campuses across the country right now, there are pervasively hostile anti-Semitic environments. And so one of the legal options available to us, and one that we avail ourselves of quite frequently, is the filing of Title VI complaints with the Department of Education's Office for Civil Rights. Real quickly, I'll say this, because Title VI is a federal law, it allows also, if you don't want to go that route, that's more the administrative route. And it's for a number of reasons, it's easier on everyone involved. But if you want to, you can actually file a federal lawsuit that includes a claim under Title VI. And we have done that at a handful of universities, including MIT and Columbia. So again, we pick and choose what seems to be the best route in terms of how we want to proceed against these institutions. But that in a nutshell is Title VI.
Any of you guys on this chat know for certain that your campuses, that your schools have been part of Title VI? Yep. I see a handful of you guys.
Yep. I'm looking at school names right now, and I'm seeing that quite a few of them, and I'll say it this way, either are or soon will be the subject of a Title VI complaint.
Is it realistic at all that in theory every single school that's infringing on these rights get it, or is it just too many to be able to? I mean, are you guys going to be spread too thin? And I'm assuming there's not that many organizations picking up on this.
Yeah, it's not even so much that we're spread so thin. We have to also keep in mind the fact that the Office for Civil Rights, OCR, they're spread very thin, right? Their resources are such that they can only investigate so many. And so the idea is the worst of the worst offenders, absolutely there needs to be legal action. And again, whether that's a federal lawsuit or whether that's a Title VI complaint that's filed with the Department of Education. And then those decisions help the other institutions that maybe are not yet subject to a Title VI complaint to understand better what it is they're supposed to be doing, not doing, things like that. So there definitely is a strategy there in terms of which schools to go after in that regard. Yeah.
When you have people that are doing this, like from the schools that we have over here, do students from the schools have to come and testify as a result?
So in the Title VI administrative process, the answer is no. If we file a Title VI complaint with the Department of Education, the only time that students have to be identified in that process is if a student had an individual incident happen, right? That it wasn't just, it's not just, this happened on my campus and it created a hostile environment, right? So we could file a Title VI complaint. Let me give you an example with regard to the activity of encampments, right? That affects the entire campus. That's not necessarily one student. But if, say, in the context of that, a student is assaulted, right? And we want to include that allegation in the complaint, then they're going to ask us for the identity of that student so that they can investigate. As you can imagine, in order for them to investigate, which means talking to the administration and asking for documents and things like that, they have to be able to give them reasonable information to be able to investigate. Did this happen? What happened? What did the administration do? Things like that. So it varies in terms of the extent to which any students would need to be identified. And even in that, though, the students wouldn't necessarily be publicly identified. The school would perhaps need to know who the students were in order to investigate those things. But in terms of public identification, the students' identities don't ever have to be revealed. And that's different, obviously, if you're talking about being a plaintiff in a federal lawsuit. I will add this, though, that StandWithUs, we actually created a separate entity. It's actually a totally separate legal entity, separate C3, called the StandWithUs Center for Legal Justice. I know that can be confusing because it still has StandWithUs in the name, but it is a separate legal entity. It's the Center for Legal Justice, and it is a membership organization. And we have utilized that to file a couple of these Title VI complaints, as well as in our lawsuits. And what that does is it allows students to join that membership organization. And if they don't want to have their name revealed publicly, they're still a part of the lawsuit as a member of the SCLJ. And the SCLJ is the named party. So there's a number of different options if privacy is an area of concern, which I understand for many students it is, and I understand why.
So it does not translate into witness protection. That's good to know. Now, I have questions from readers, but I want to be able to I want to have people participate here. So I want to see some hand raises and want to get to some of you and your own questions. And Sammy, you've had yours up already before even anything. So go ahead, Sammy, and ask one.
So I'm not sure if you heard, but has there ever been a case where the students believe that there shouldn't be a Title 6 case against the school? And never mind, there's been a Title 6 against us, but a lot of us thought the university is doing all they can to support the students. Because I know at Drexel, we had cases where I can see why there would be a Title 6 case, but the university immediately condemned it and started an investigation. Yes, they haven't found the perpetrator, but that's still in Title 6 case, or how much does like the students' opinion at the school, especially students who've gotten impact, matter when it comes to these kinds of things?
I can tell you from our perspective at Stand With Us, it matters a great deal. We generally try to make sure that these are student supported. Most of them are student initiated in the sense that we hear from the students and who say, this is what's going on. Can you help? And, throughout the process, it's a mutual agreement that we're going to file a Title VI complaint. So we very much want this to be, if not student initiated and student led, at the very least student supported. What you're talking about sounds like maybe an area where there just needs to be a little bit more of an explanation and understanding of what Title VI can do. So just because an administration maybe speaks out and condemns something, that's an important step, but it's a first step and it's just words, right? So if there is an actual pervasive hostile environment, right? And again, we get that information from students that this is what we're experiencing. If that's something that's ongoing and the university is doing nothing more than, reaching out to check on students and saying publicly how bad this is, more is required, right? And so it may be that certain students are saying, and they're not doing the more, right? And so my regular experience, my day-to-day experience is being limited and I'm not able to equally participate, and so other students may say, oh, well, I thought that they were doing a good job because they spoke out. So again, we really do try very hard to get as clear of a picture as we possibly can. And then I'll say this, one of the other options under Title VI that we have recently begun using doesn't necessarily impact everyone. There's an option to do a mediation. At the very outset, when you file a Title VI complaint with the Office for Civil Rights, you can ask for them to initiate a mediation proceeding. Now, the institution still gets to say yes or no. Either they want to participate in that or they don't. But if the institution says, yes, sure, that's actually a really good vehicle for if you have one or two, maybe a small number of students, as opposed to a large number of students who are saying, yeah, this whole campus is a real problem. You maybe have a small number of students who are saying, okay, we understand that not everybody's having this problem, but we are having a regular problem and the administration knows about it and they are refusing to do anything to fix the problem. Then maybe that's a smaller kind of a situation that can be dealt with just between those students and the administration. It's still a Title VI complaint, but the way it gets handled is slightly different. So there are some options.
Let me just say, Carly, you speak extremely well, better than I even had hoped. But for the sake of the fact that for a lot of these people it's close to midnight, I want to get to a lot more of their questions and yours. Let's try to sort of like a debate. Let's try to keep it a little bit more brief if we can.
Sure, happy to.
So Topaz, I know that there's a number of people waiting, but Topaz, go ahead.
Hi. So seeing the rise, at least at my school, has made me extremely worried, specifically when it comes to the student government, because we have gone to our administration multiple times about the student government, and they've always said because it's a separate organization, they don't really have a say in what the student government does and what the student government president can do. And it's gone to a point where they're passing BDS laws, they're making Palestine bills. They have actively left out Hillel at any point in time, I guess. When the administration says their hands are tied, at what point does it get to a point where Title VI is involved, not just for administration, but for student government?
I can make this one really easy for you. We are well aware of the situation at your school. We are working on it. The fact that it's a separate legal entity is not an excuse. So we can talk separately if you want to about what's going on there. Yep, you're in good hands.
That's great. Glad to hear that. Hey, Don Levy, go ahead, from U of A. We haven't heard from you today.
Yeah, so mine's a little bit like different than campus discussion, but a lot of states are starting to ban BDS, and a lot of people, especially like within student governments, but also just like in the media and in general, are arguing that that's like a limitation of free speech. So like in your experience as like a constitutional litigator, like what's your stance on that?
That's also a really easy one. I helped draft the model legislation, the anti-BDS legislation. I'm a proponent. The easy answer is that we specifically drafted that legislation to ensure, and then we've amended it since where necessary in states, to ensure that it addresses economic conduct only, not expressive activity, right? So it's very clear that you can say what you want to in terms of supporting BDS, supporting whatever causes you want to, but when it comes to either using, states investing their money, they get to decide how they want to do that, or who they want to contract with. Contracting and giving state funds to someone under a contract is economic activity. It is not speech. The most recent court cases have made that very clear. So that's as, I think, succinct as I can answer that one.
Appreciate it. Let's go to Jacob over at W&M.
Hi. I was just curious if you could share any thoughts on the administration's May 7th letter regarding Title VI protections. It had listed out several different examples that, to me, they seem like the examples had to be very like repetitive in nature. And I was just wondering if you guys had any reaction to that May 7th letter.
Yeah, so the reality is, as I said before, it's what we are looking at, what OCR is looking at, is a pervasively hostile environment. That can happen through one egregious incident, or it can happen because things are happening repeatedly over time. There's nothing definitive that says it has to be one or the other. The reality is what really matters. And I'll give you this example. This is going to be a little bit wordier of an answer, but I think it's important. We just got a decision. The two first decisions that OCR has reached in terms of resolving Title VI complaints post October 7th came out yesterday. University of Michigan and the CUNY system. We had an open one within the CUNY system against Hunter's Silberman School of Social Work. The OCR decision made it very clear that although the internal investigation of the administration had happened, right, they could not possibly have any solid basis for saying that there wasn't a pervasively hostile environment. Why? Because they hadn't bothered to talk to the actual students who had been impacted by the incidents involved, right? So it was one incident, right? It was one class session. But OCR was still recognizing that, wait, there may have been a pervasively hostile climate that was created by it. You need to talk to the students and find out what the impact was on them. That's really the key when you're talking about trying to figure out, is there a valid Title VI complaint? Again, one incident could be egregious enough. It could be a pattern that's required.
Gabriel?
Hi, yes. Thank you, Carly. We've spoken on the phone before for my campus, especially. I did have a question, though. So as you said, the Department of Education is incredibly overworked. And there seems to be kind of, at least I've heard from a lot of people, there's kind of an oversaturation of these cases. And it's kind of reducing their impact. In a sense, that's definitely a concern that people brought forth. So with that in mind, do you know of any other kind of legal avenues to pursue us apart from Title VI that can put pressure on universities, or ways to make Title VI more targeted and more effective?
Yeah, so I certainly know of other ways, and we're utilizing them. As I mentioned, we have federal lawsuits in court against MIT and against Columbia. In addition to having Title VI claims in those. We have breach of contract claims, essentially the argument being that when students decide to enroll in a university, the policies, the statements that university has put out, that's a contract between the university and the students. And they clearly have breached those here. And we are seeking tuition reimbursement as a result of the breach of contract. The other major issue that we've now begun to address here and to utilize is the KKK laws. There are criminal aspects to the KKK laws, and then there are civil aspects. And it really has to do with conspiracy to intimidate and threaten. And so the federal lawsuits against MIT and Columbia involve claims under the KKK laws. So again, there are additional means of going after these universities. I can tell you that some of those allow for some hefty fees and damages. So yes, that puts significant pressure on universities.
I apologize if I'm going out of order at all, but I'm trying to get to everybody. And Angelina, go ahead.
So I think a lot of us are upperclassmen now, either obviously sophomore, junior, senior. So I wanted to see if you had any advice. Like, do you think we're going to see change within the rest of our college career? And also once we it's very easy, it's not easy, but once we make incident or bias reports on campus, it's kind of in our control. But when we turn to outside organizations for help, like either Stand With Us, ADL, whatever, to report a case, it often gets out of our control and kind of is up to whoever's in charge of the case. So do you have any advice for that? Because once it kind of gets a higher power, it feels very disconnected, or we don't know what's going on or whatever. So do you think we're going to see change, and how do we deal with it kind of being out of our control at that point?
Yeah, sure. Great questions. One, I'll say this, I'm an eternal optimist, and I wouldn't keep doing what I'm doing if I thought I were just spinning my wheels. So yes, I do think that there's change coming. Is it a quick process? No. If you're going to be a senior this next year, I would expect some, but not nearly probably what you're hoping to see in terms of changing. But if you've still got 2 years left, then yes, absolutely, you should expect to see things getting better. Not just because of what we're doing, but also I'll add this, because of what legislatures are doing. Right, there are new state laws that are being implemented that are intended to help, and I think will help in many ways. In terms of the idea of things being out of your control, the best advice I can give you is be very clear in your communication, right? If you do seek outside help, be very clear. I want to be directly involved, and ask them, what do I need to do? That may mean I need to put my name on this thing, right? Because OCR is not going to deal with just one complainant. They're going to communicate with all the complainants. And so you need to be clear about what your expectations and your intentions are, and then figure out what mechanisms need to be in place. And because the reality is you can only have so much control if you're not in a position where you say, okay, I'll put my name on it. So having that understanding, but being really clear in communication, I think is key.
Thank you.
Max?
As someone who's in a state where on the governmental level, there's definitely a lot of support for us, but maybe not necessarily as close on the local level. We have a lot of support when things get bigger, like an encampment, but definitely with smaller situations, we kind of get gaslit into believing it's not as big. So since we have various actions, but what kind of avenues do you think we should be taking in terms of effectively communicating the violations of code of conduct to administration so they still act on them, even though they're might be not on the scale of a large encampment?
Honestly, I think I would go back to something I mentioned a minute ago, which is really relying upon, and we can help you to, with wording, and I know we work with you, so, we can do this, but being really clear about the contractual nature of those policies, right? That I came to this school with the understanding, because you put this policy out there, that this is the way things are going to work. And so this is the expectation that I have. It may not be an encampment. It may seem like a smaller thing, but the two things I think are being really clear about that contractual nature of policies and how they work and what your expectations are. But the other thing I think is invaluable is, again, my voice matters only so much when it comes to talking about impact. You're the students. You're the ones who are being impacted daily. So being very clear and careful and precise in the way that you explain and describe the impact, so that there isn't this minimizing of, oh, it's not that big of a deal. Explain to them why it is a big deal to you, what the impact is, and why that is a big deal, even if it's not a campus-wide situation.
So something that we usually try to point to like code of conduct and say, that this is harassment or that, and we kind of get thrown in the face with what we're told by our legal advisors is that it's free speech. Can you kind of explain, like on a general level, where the boundary between harassment and free speech is as a constitutional litigator?
Yep, absolutely. So it's not, in their defense, it's not always clear cut, right? But when what would otherwise be just protected hate speech, offensive, is directed at an individual or a group of individuals, and particularly based on an aspect of their identity, that is no longer just an expression of opinion, right? But that is an attempt to harass, threaten, intimidate. And so that really is the difference. If they don't know that you're Jewish or they're not directing it at an individual person, then maybe it is just an expression of a really offensive, hateful thought. But if they are directing it at you or a group, that's often going to be the line of demarcation.
Thank you. Alana was waiting for a while.
Yeah, so at my school, UNC, I feel like the biggest issue we run into is it's not considered anti-Semitic enough, or it's not openly anti-Semitic enough. And I feel like it's a constant problem we run into when we report incidents through the appropriate pathways, like Hillel tells us, report to the EOC, Equal Opportunity and Compliance Office, what's going on. So we file a report and they're like, no, this doesn't count, or it doesn't meet this criteria, so it doesn't count. So I feel like all these things happen that lead to a hostile environment for Jews, but because it's all evaluated separately, they always say it doesn't count enough, so we're not going to do anything. So then what do we even do at that point? What are our options?
Honestly, what I would suggest is bring all of that to us, because what you're describing is in and of itself disparate treatment for Jewish people, which is anti-Semitism. So the fact that they're treating anti-Semitism differently is anti-Semitic in that situation. So yeah, definitely reach out and let us help you with that.
Okay, will do.
Let's get to just a couple of last ones, and because we're going to be able to also get the chance for people to ask their questions to you guys as students. But in the meantime, Ezra, you wanted to ask something?
Yeah. So what would you say if a department, their policies for social media, for what they post on their social media, were very ambiguous and anything would fly, but when something pro-Israel was to be posted, there was all this pushback, and when something actually got posted, it was later removed when nothing else on that Instagram page, that department Instagram page, has ever been removed. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's a tougher one when it comes to departmental speech. Generally, academic freedom is going to protect departments in making those types of decisions in terms of what they say and what they don't say. The thing that I would add, though, is that typically schools will have policies that say that, departments need to distance themselves. They need to have some sort of a disclaimer that makes it clear that they're not speaking for the university. So there is a difference between departments speaking and the university speaking, and that needs to be clearly delineated. I wish it weren't the case, because I understand that as a student in a department, that's very disheartening and discouraging to know, oh, well, my views are not aligned with the general views of the department. You could go even so far as to ask for policy updates, right, and amendments to make that very clear, and even to say that, the departmental statements do not speak for everyone who's a member of that department. It's a little bit harder, though, on a legal front to make real demands in that regard.
Nobody else put up new ones, but I think we can get to the last three. Ada, my niece.
Oh, hello. I kind of wanted to ask about, I've heard a tiny bit about RICO cases against SJP. Do you know anything about this?
I do. So there are a number of us who are involved in conversations. When I say us, I mean legal minds and organizations that are, yes, in conversation right now about the possibility of RICO lawsuits, which again it's a separate type of a conspiracy. It's racketeering, influencing, things like that. But it's, suffice it to say, in general terms, it's a conspiracy type claim that would really get at the collaboration that's going on a national level, national SJP on campuses, things like that. So yeah, I can't say a whole lot more about it right now, except that, yes, there are ongoing and very real discussions about the possibility of RICO claims being brought as well. And just so you know, I think one of the main reasons that it's important to think about this is because so far everything that we've talked about and most of what's happening right now is aimed at the administrations. This is an opportunity to hold the actual individuals who are involved in the harassment, the threats, and the intimidation accountable.
And the time I hear RICO discussed other than here is usually in mobster movies. So
that's right. That's right.
Have something in common. Brandon?
Hi. Yeah, at my school, I hosted a pro-Israel march, and yeah, someone took a picture of us and put it on Snapchat, and the caption was, "Can someone shoot this shit up?" So my question is, what's the likelihood that this student will be set free and no charges will be happened?
Has the student been arrested?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure right now he's like free. He's at home, but he has a court case or court hearing in 2 weeks.
Gosh, if I could predict the outcome of legal cases, I'd be making a whole lot more money and doing something different. But I will say this, because a lot of it will depend upon background. Does this person have priors? Is this just a student who made a stupid comment? I mean, I can just tell you that, certain prosecutors think differently about those things. So, and I'll just mention this one thing. There's a program called diversion, which instead of being incarcerated, sometimes, again, people who are in that position, students who don't have any priors like that, they might be offered a diversion program where they don't get incarcerated. Ultimately, it might actually be expunged from their record. So again, it depends on how lenient the prosecutor wants to be. That's really all I can say.
I want to clarify, because I think Brandon's thought process here was not just about the legal, but I think he's actually probably a little bit fearful about this person coming back to campus. So regardless of how the court case goes, let's just pretend that the court case does release him fully. Is it realistic? Is it a realistic fear for the Jews on campus that this person will be back on their campus?
Again, it's a tough question. I think that if that were the case, I would say that there's every valid reason to be talking to the administration, but just because the person may not be incarcerated does not mean that the administration has to allow that person back on campus. And so I think that would be your avenue if there were a real concern that this person's coming back on campus. The administration needs to be the one to do the right thing and make sure that that's not a possibility. Yeah.
Kind of like a criminal case versus a civil case with OJ, for example.
For sure.
Not guilty in one, but guilty in the other. And let's finally go to Yuval for the last question.
Yeah, hi, thanks, Carly. So at MIT, we have quite a bit of Israeli staff, temporary employees, mainly postdoctoral researchers. And I was wondering whether or not there are any Title VI complaints that are specifically dealing with staff, and are they worthwhile pursuing such complaints separately from the student cases?
Yeah. So if you remember at the very beginning, I said that Title VI was part of a larger package of non-discrimination laws. When we're talking about employment, staff, employees, that's Title VII. That's an employment law, right? Non-discrimination law. Certainly, yes, those are in the works at various institutions. And if there is, need to have that discussion, absolutely reach out. We actually just hired a new employment lawyer. So we are primed and ready to start talking to people about those things. So if that's a need, let us know.
Thank you.
Carly, how big is StandWithUs' legal department?
I'm talking about it like it's huge, aren't I? I think we have 6 attorneys at this point in the U.S. We're not a huge team, but and I'll just toot our horn for just a minute, just to say, like, it's pretty remarkable. And you guys, and I'll toot your horn too, you guys are pretty remarkable. The ones that we're working with in terms of students, in terms of just the information, the time that you put into it that allows us to be so efficient at what we're doing. So we're all getting a lot done with not a lot of resources. So kudos to all of you and for helping make our jobs a little bit easier in that regard.
And thank you. And shout out to my friend Yael Lerman, who you work with, who's in legal over there, I think head of legal maybe. And so Appreciate her for connecting me to you. Honestly, very much appreciative that you're over here. I really wanted to give everybody here an opportunity to get basically a free legal counsel. So thank you for being here. And she's talking to us from Alaska. She's the only person on this chat who's actually even earlier than I am here in Los Angeles. Everyone else is later. So thank you.
Yeah, before I jump off of here, I want to say that we are here. If you need us, you can contact us, legal@standwithus.com, and we will be more than happy to help walk you through whatever the situation is.
Appreciate you very much. Thank you.
Thanks for having me. Night, everybody.
Absolutely. Good night to you. Now that we have a bunch of questions from readers, and I have questions for you guys as well. So thank you for those of you who are still on. We've been close to we've been on for close to 2 hours. So first thing I wanted to ask is I wanted to switch to something positive, right? And Sammy had brought this up to me before over at Drexel, is that although we're sort of using humor to talk about some pretty sad and negative things and talking about things seriously just now with Stand With Us, I'd like to actually pivot for a second and find out, has there been some good happening? Have some of the campuses that you guys are at actually been helpful, even surprisingly helpful, and so on? So go ahead, Sammy, talk about what it's happening over at Drexel, and then we'll go over to Max and then Alana.
So I was first of all shocked to say how much I got on when I did the tallies, but we have a lot of hateful stuff going on campus. I also seen the Jewish community come together, as well as administration really standing up for us. I haven't thought of a time when there's been a reported instance. The administration didn't immediately reach out. We had administration drive in on the day off to tell Chabad what happened on October 7th. Our dean of students drove to Chabad in the Hillel to tell them what happened because they were afraid to not know because of Shabbos. But also, our president has been very standing up for us. That every time there's a problem, he would talk to our Hillel and our rabbi at Hillel and Chabad constantly and been very supportive. And a lot of times, whenever we had an event we wanted to do, they would get us security no matter how last minute. There's never an event we couldn't do because they were worried about security. So, while there has been a lot of hatred and we got the fourth amount of points, I still think there's a lot of good that happened at Drexel, including administration really showing on our side, and as well as really started the Jewish community come together. The first Shabbos after October 7th, we had close to 150 people for Shabbos dinner. And 2 days after, we had 150 people, again, just for a rally by Mario drag and our statue. So
that is very lovely to hear, Sammy, and it's nice. And certainly the purpose of this chat is not to, shit all over every school uniformly. And there's definitely been some schools that have done better jobs than others. And we want people to feel encouraged more than discouraged. The purpose of this, though, is to also be realistic and let people know what to expect and how to lean on each other and what resources there are. So hopefully you guys are getting that. And hopefully people who are going to watch this will get that. The purpose of this chat is certainly not for everybody to simply, go to trade school and not actually go to university. Thank you, Sammy. I appreciate it. And I appreciate all of your help behind the scenes as well. Alana, go ahead.
Yeah, so I'm actually really, I wouldn't say happy with how my administration has responded, but it could be worse, I guess. So at UNC, most of the student body is very, very, very angry, especially with the chancellor, who, for a lot of reasons, mostly political. But anyways, he was just appointed this past January, and the first week of him being chancellor, he came to Hillel for Shabbat, he came to Chabad for Shabbat, and he's been very, very clear in his support for us as the Jewish community at UNC. I think the main issue of what happens at UNC is because a lot of the vitriol and hate and hostile behavior comes from students. Like the majority of it is from students. A lot of what they're doing falls within the lines of free speech. So then UNC's hands are tied. It's a public university. It's on public land. They can't legally stop this stuff from happening, but they've been very clear that they do support us. And I think the best example of that is during the encampments when the protesters tore down the main American flag from the flagpole and replaced it with a Palestinian flag. Our Chancellor Lee Roberts actually came out of the administration building and stood with us and personally walked into the middle of all of the hateful people just like standing around the flagpole. He walked into the middle and he personally helped put the American flag back up. And I feel like that was just a really symbolic moment of him showing his support for us and how he has been doing what he can. And there's just so many like lines and red tape and bureaucracy behind it. And I also just want to shout him out because he gets so much hate. I just graduated, and during our commencement, he like gave a speech because he's the chancellor, and everyone was booing every third word he said, and we were all just sitting there like, shut up, like just shut up.
Well, I'm glad you gave him a public yasher koach to him. That's really,
yeah, claps yasher koach to Lee Roberts.
Yeah, that's lovely. We haven't had actually Aden answer anything yet, so I'd like to hear from Aden, who was raising his hand over there.
One person that really like came to like every event that I had and like really like was listening was like the provost of my school, who really deals with like all the academics sort of things. Like I had a panel that had like a lot of big people on it. Shai Davidai from Columbia University spoke on it, and we had these great conversations and all that, and he was just one person who really helped from administration. Other than that, though, there wasn't a lot of positive, but I just wanted to thank the provost.
Nice to focus on that. By the way, did I just bastardize your name? Do you go by Aiden, or are you Aden?
You can call me whatever, but it's Aiden.
It is Aiden. I realized afterwards I was kind of pulling a Key and Peele on your name. Okay, now what I want to know is sticking on the positive-ish, and we'll try to stick to like one or two people to answer each one and flip it around because there's plenty of questions. Have you guys found anything actually to be effective when talking to protesters? Have any of you actually managed to have positive experiences where you realize something works and you've been able to use that? Yuval, right away.
Yeah, so I spent quite a bit of time talking to encampment people, or quite a bit of time trying to convince them to talk to me, and had maybe 3 long-form conversations that lasted more than an hour with people from the encampment. And I think the best way I had to reach out to them was hearing them out, let them speak, and then try and answer with my experiences as an Israeli. So for example, what does intifada mean to me, right? So when I explain to protesters that when they chant globalize intifada, I see in my mind's eye, the Maxim restaurants blown up or human flesh littering the streets, right? And that they don't get to appropriate this term from me. This is my lived experience. This is and I get to define this. Or similarly with the word Zionism. So I think these are the main kind of talking points that help me bring this progressive language and logic into the conversation and pointing out the hypocrisies.
Okay, thank you. I know your perspective is also going to be extra interesting and shaped since you are Israeli. And I want to go to Max, and then that actually brings me to something else that I should have brought up in the beginning. But Max, go ahead.
So I don't know if there's necessarily an effective way to go for the people that are necessarily leading the protest. Obviously, their ideas are baked in. But for me, something I like to do, this was big for me when they were pushing things like BDS through student government, was to kind of broaden the coalition of showing how they're against more than just Jews. For example, in my school, we have about 40,000 students, a little more than that, and there's only 1,500 estimated Jews, maybe even lower than that. And something that, a lot of the schools you're hearing is divest. A lot of people want divestments from certain companies. And I kind of pointed out the fact, because in the student government hearing, they kept claiming how they wanted, divestments because of the bombs and this and that. And I said, do you want the University of South Florida to divest from the U.S. Army? I asked them that in front of the whole school, and they said yes. So trying to kind of prove how they're not just anti-Jewish, they're not just anti-Israeli, they're anti-American, that kind of broadens that coalition, and it definitely brings a lot more people to our side because, it's commonly said, but at a pro-Palestine protest, you won't see an American flag, but in an Israeli protest, you will.
Absolutely. That's a good point. People have asked me since I've started doing my chosen links section since October, not coincidental with the timing, obviously. People have asked me what has been effective, and I'm just going to chime in for once and give my own personal answer because I think this is a useful part for people to watch. And I think that for the most part, the people who are just going to spew the hate, they're not usually, the ears are closed, the mind is closed. But the whole purpose of this, and I think we can all agree, is for all the sort of hopefully silent majority that aren't really screaming, but are listening and being influenced. What I find is helpful is kind of simplistic. But when I have a little bit of time with somebody and I'm by a computer at the hospital, for example, where I'm a nurse, I'll say, you ever looked at a map of Israel? Have any of you guys ever done this? Just pull out the map of Israel and you do the zooming in on the map and you're zooming. You're like, yeah, I can see the Middle East, but where's Israel? Where's Israel? And you keep zooming until finally you see that little speck that's Israel. And you get to show them the whole map and say, so where do you think Hezbollah is coming from? And literally in less than 2 minutes, I'm able to show them just on a map this speck. And I'm able to show them just on the computer screen right there. And I'm like, I'm there over here in the north is Hezbollah, and over here is where the Gaza Strip is. And who's in charge of the Gaza Strip? I remind them it's actually been since 2005/6 when Hamas took over. And, and I show them the map. And usually that little visual has actually been very effective on people who are like, whoa, I cannot believe that. And they realize that like everybody around them is an enemy, except for like the ones that are sort of like in a stale truce, right? With Egypt and Jordan that basically hate them, but don't attack them. So that has actually been strangely effective. Another one is that, and then I'm going to move back to you guys. But another one that I find useful is I was at my hospital the educator for COVID during COVID, right? So that was a lot of fun. And I was training. I gave a bunch of seminars to nurses, to staff, even to the doctors, and to the community on things like this. I think we were using Microsoft Teams, and we had these sessions that were just as long as this. And I explained to people, now, who are the majority of the people? We've avoided politics so far, right? But for the sake of this, I'm going to get into politics for a second. Who are the majority of people that we are having to try to get through to for the anti-Israel stuff? It's unfortunately been people on the very far on the left. I'm not going to say Democrat. I'm not going to say liberal. I'm going to say left. I prefer the term leftist. It's been more leftist. I kind of like that term more because it's sort of matched up with leftism, Marxism, and so on, I think we've seen. And yes, there is definitely a problem also with the extreme right as well. But for the most part, what we're seeing with these, it's been that. And who did we have for the most part being very anti everything with COVID and the vaccines and so on? It's for the most part was people very much on the right. So what I explain to people when I'm talking to them, and usually the people I'm talking to are now people on the left that I'm trying to make sure they understand Israel better, is I'll say to them, you remember how I forget Israel for a second. You remember how during COVID, how annoying it was that people just got all their own information from swiping right about COVID? And they just thought they were right because everything was like, oh man, the government this and the doctors are doing this and the vaccines are worse than the cure. And you remember how they were all saying that? And they're like, yeah, of course. Because people we're talking to now are people on the left, right? So they're like, yeah, of course, dumb people, dumb whatever on the right. I'm like, yeah, it's a shame because they were using their confirmation bias and the social media algorithms and it was just confirming what they thought they knew. So just like that was bad misinformation, the internet does not take political sides. The internet just wants you to stay online and stay engaged. That's all the internet cares about. It could care less who you're voting for. It just wants you to stop clicking away and stay on their website. So the entire thing is to understand, I say to them, just like people on the right were convinced that they were right about COVID, people on the left, unfortunately, are super convinced that they're right about all of this stuff about Israel. And isn't that interesting? Using those same algorithms and using those same techniques. This might take maybe, the map thing maybe takes 60 to 90 seconds. This part maybe takes more like 5 minutes, but I got to tell you, it is very effective because just about everybody you're talking to on the left, I've never met somebody where I was talking to them one-on-one where they weren't like, that's a very good point. That's true, because that made no sense during COVID. But that makes perfect sense about this. So when they realize that that's a double standard, because people are getting information the same way, they're not getting their news from the Wall Street Journal or the New York Times. People were dealing with it for the most part, getting it from the interwebs. So I hope that's the only thing I'm going to chime in with myself, but I found those techniques to be very, very handy. Now, I want to actually ask something interesting to you guys that I should have started this off with. A dear friend, Alex Schramm, said to me, and he's a professor here in Southern California. He's on sabbatical now. And I was very interested if he had a question for you guys. And he actually was not a question, but it was more of a preamble to this. He said, what's really important is that people who are protesting us, that we don't just use rhetoric when we're talking, right? That we don't just say slogans, that we don't just make it about fast answers, right? Good, bad. And even that includes not assuming that we're using words that we all understand, right? Blue is blue to me, but is not blue to that person. So in this case, when I say anti-Semitism, that doesn't necessarily mean the same thing as when you say anti-Semitism, right? And when I say pro-Palestinian protester, that does not mean the same thing as what somebody else does. So I came up with a couple of examples, and I'd like to know what you guys most like as terms for the two sides, so to speak. So when we're talking about anti-Semitism, what do you guys actually, forget about what you're used to doing, because most of us are used to saying anti-Semitism. We've heard it our whole lives, myself included. But here's two alternatives. I can say Jew hatred, and I can also say Jewish racism. I'm very curious. Take a second. What do you actually intellectually find consistent with what's happening, and what words you kind of wish would fall more into the vernacular? Anti-Semitism, as it is, Jew hatred, or Jewish racism, or something else that I didn't think of. What do you guys think? I don't even mind right now if you guys want to turn off if you want to turn off your mics for a second and try to just sort of give one word type answers. What do you guys think?
Personally, I mean, anti-Semitism, I think, is at this point the best because it encompasses a lot of different things in the same way that, like, saying, for instance, racism encompasses a lot of different things. Because I Jewish racism might work. I don't love it, but if something like Judeophobia or like Judeo-Mesia or anti-Jewish something, anti-Jewish activity, anti-Jewish legislation, anti-Jewish speech, that feels like it would maybe just be best to say anti-Jewish.
Well, what do you guys think for a second before we go there? I want to hear what Angelina says, but out of curiosity, how many of you guys, given all of the options, actually prefer the term we've always used, anti-Semitism, when we think about it? Fair number. Yeah, I don't have a bias in this. I don't have a horse in the race. Angelina, what were you going to say?
The history of the word anti-Semitism is also kind of sketchy, and I think that flat out, just especially in this time, I think Jew hatred is honestly the best way to describe it. And I don't know about everyone else, but I've had many I'm getting some okay.
Don't worry about it. We're all
from my experience, I've had many people get mad at even anti-Semitism because Jews are not the only Semites, so that's a whole nother argument within itself that I never had to really argue before. And now literally even the own word for Jew hatred, whether you like that term or not, is trying to be corrupted by protesters by saying that, but, Semites are this or Semites are this. So even your own hatred is not justified. And so I think if you put it flat out and just say, like, call it as it is, I'm a fan of that. I think it's a much more stark term, but if that's what it is, then that's what it is. And I don't know. I'm curious to see why people are shaking their heads now.
I am too, but before we go on, like we did last time, how many of you actually feel more appropriate saying Jew hatred? Because I was starting to lean in that direction before this whole chat. Just curious, how many people? Okay, probably about a similar number. I mean, it's a strong term, and that which make it better and worse depending on what. But I think a lot of us have heard some bullshitty things where people try to say, I can't be anti-Semitic because I'm technically a Semite. And you're just like, shut up. And we've all seen that. And that's hard. And does that mean we have to throw away the baby with the bathwater, as the expression goes? I don't know. I'm curious. Does anybody out of curiosity prefer the term Jewish racism, which I've just heard a little bit less? Sort of makes it more in line with, the idea of racism, which people are used to hearing now. Okay. Just curious about that. Does somebody want to give one last type of term that they're thinking about? No? Okay. So then in that case, let's talk about the other side of it, which is when we talk about the pro-Palestinian protesters, which is, of course, the default, the equivalent of anti-Semitism. The term is pro-Palestinian protesters, right? That's the term that's always used. And then we start to hear some people who are more on our side, right, who are not big fans of being, screamed at and called, Jew Nazis and stuff. That we say they're actually more like pro-Hamas protesters. Another term that we'll just say is just straight out call a spade what a spade. Anti-Israel protesters. It's kind of safe as well to say. And then, of course, there's other things we can say. So out of curiosity, pro-Palestinian, which is the default, pro-Hamas, anti-Israel, or something else. Let's start easy. Does anybody here like the default term of pro-Palestinian protester? Okay, now that is interesting. So our default term for the Jewish hatred of anti-Semitism, people are okay, not okay, but close enough to, and there's plenty between that and Jew hatred, but the default term that the media, that the press, that the pro-Palestinian protesters themselves are using is not acceptable by any of us. And I agree with you in that case. So let's see then let's throw that out the window. And let's let the world see that we are saying as students on all different campuses. And right now what we have left here, it looks like 15 people that I still see on camera talking to me. That's 15 different schools across the country where people have experienced anti-Semitism or Jew hatred, and people have seen pro-Palestinian protesters, which they are saying are not pro-Palestinian protesters. That's an offensive term. So pro-Hamas or anti-Israel? What would you say? Let's make it easy first. Who would say pro-Hamas? Pro-Hamas protesters. Okay. It looks like it's going to be a little bit less than half. And who would say what did I say for the other one? Who would say anti-Israel? Anti-Israel protesters. Okay. And out of curiosity, is there anybody who would say another one that I didn't come up with? No. So we're going to go between.
If it were my choice, I would say probably pro-Palestine, because I think the implication of saying pro-Palestinian is that you're like kind of doing something out of like you're arguing for in because you're looking for the just the outlook of the Palestinian people rather than supporting a state entity or a set of governmental entities.
You slightly modified it, saying not pro-Palestinian but pro-Palestine, which sounds similar, but it has a different implication, right? You're kind of saying pro-Palestine, and then the next question we would all have is like, and where's Israel left in this case? Are they next to them, or is Palestine just erased Israel? So that's an interesting modification.
Anti-Israel also makes sense, but if I want to be as neutral as possible and do something that's the most correct, I would probably say pro-Palestine.
I have a feeling a lot of the press do sometimes switch and toggle between pro-Palestinian and pro-Palestine, but I got to say I kind of see them as the same, even though I can etymologically see the difference. No, so let's go back then. I want to hear at least one person from each side of what you like. What do you like? Those who said pro-Hamas. Somebody who like pro-Hamas. Okay, so Aiden, I have to say you because I said your name wrong last time. So Aiden, why do you like pro-Hamas as your choice?
the reason I picked pro-Hamas over anything else was more because things such as like justifying October 7th, chanting globalize the Intifada, things like that, like very like terror rhetoric, and like also like going on campus, harassing people, just praising literal terrorism is just like insane to me. So that's why I picked that term over anything else.
Calling a spade a spade. I get that. Okay, and anti-Israel. Let's have somebody speak up for anti-Israel. All right. It's hard to, the screens all jump up when you do this, so it's a little bit hard. But Noah, I don't even remember speaking to you yet, so I'm glad you're speaking. Say something.
I think my problem with pro-Hamas typically is that it's hard to lump all of them in there because a lot of them just really don't just don't have like any really don't have like much knowledge of this at all, and so they have come in for whatever reason, and I don't know, I feel like I think a lot of them are definitely pro-Hamas, but labeling the entire like protest as it might be a stretch sometimes, but I think what they all are united on is being anti-Israel. So I think that's just a broader that's just a broader thing to catch them all by a broader term.
That's reasonable what you just said. Let's make that our next question. In your experiences on school, let's start with a show of hands. Do you find, show of hands, that the protests you've had on your schools are majority ignoramus who don't really know which river, which sea, and honestly don't care about eradicating Israel? They just are going along, virtue signaling? Yeah? Is there anybody in this chat who finds that their campus is actually more than half straight up like hateful pro-Hamas people who understand Hamas? Yuval is saying yes. No, he's not. Still from before. Okay. So everybody does feel that the majority of them are more on the ignorant end and less on the straight up hate end. Not that that's much of an excuse. So that is very interesting. Now, do you feel optimistic or pessimistic as a whole for post-graduation, these ignoramuses, do you feel more optimistic or pessimistic that these people are going to continue actually getting along well with Jews and having no problem with it and getting along well with people from Israel, and this is just going to be a silly thing from their past? Or are these people actually 5 years from now going to be people that straight up just hate Israel and hate Jews and continue to conflate us? So I'd like to have at least one person answer from each end. So let's start with somebody. Well, let's just go ahead and start with Ethan, who hasn't spoken, and we'll see whichever one he's going to say, and then we'll have somebody say the others.
I don't feel like it would change their rhetoric much. I feel like university shapes your opinions and you form opinions while university, whether you've been indoctrinated or not. And at the end of the day, when you're talking 5, 10, 15 years from now, these are the same people who will be running your legislation pieces, and what they're looking for and what they've learned in how they're shaping their political aspect of their political I guess identity is from a lot of things that they learn at university, such as student government, such as right to protest, such as right to free speech. So I feel like what people are learning right now is how their opinions and their careers are formed, especially when it comes to political aspect.
Yeah. And that's a very scary, pessimistic future. If so, that makes us a lot of people, including my wife, have to wonder, like, do we have our passports? And which other places can we work in the future? And then the obvious question is, well, where is better than here? All right, but I want somebody to tell me who feels differently from Ethan. All right. I have not heard anything from Miss Nasrati. So from Loyola in my backyard, let's hear from you.
Hi. Well, my optimistic view is also pessimistic because whatever. But I think that like the other side of this is that unfortunately, and kind of like what you were saying with the internet just being this like positive feedback loop and feeding itself, that this is a trend. And like that's also kind of disturbing, and that like, you know, my parents were born in Iran and grew up in Israel, and like this is something we've always had to know. This is anti-Semitism has always been a part of our vocabulary, and like I'm sure that applies to a lot of us. But this is something new to people, and it's something trendy, and there's a lot of people who I think just want to hop on what they think is correct or helpful, or like, I hate woke, which like, it's made everything so extreme. But in that sense also, things change and like something else will happen, and who knows, maybe they'll be clinging on that. And like we've talked about, like what anti-Semitic acts have occurred on campus as much as now before October 7th or before all this was happening. And like, unfortunately, the world keeps moving around and other things will happen. And so there's a chance that people will just jump on a new trend. And not that that's better, and not that that says something positive about the students and the people we interact with in our schools, but that's my overall positive
hoping to be able to say, look, something shiny over here, distract
exactly the shiny new toy of something else that they will consider environmental or whatever it is. It doesn't matter.
Right. And that's the sad thing about us as Jews. I'm sure you've all read something along the lines of like, they hate us when we are when we seem to have power because they think that we have power, and they hate us when we don't have power because they think that we're pathetic. And, it's just, it doesn't really matter what we're doing. It's an excuse at the end of the day. Since you brought up that you're from Iran, which I already knew, and living here in Los Angeles like you do, I have a ridiculous amount of Persian friends and coworkers. Something that I've noticed is very interesting. I don't know if you guys, depending on where you're from, have seen this, but have you ever noticed that people in America who come from Middle Eastern countries that are not friendly to Israel, have you ever noticed that the one major exception in terms of friendliness to Jews tends to generally be, and I'm not talking about other Jewish ones, tends to be Iranian non-Jewish people that come to America? I don't know if you guys have noticed that. And I'm not saying this is all the time. There's unfortunately a new player on Survivor, and I'm actually going to be doing a Survivor session next for any of you who are fans of the show. I'm going to be getting a bunch of pro-Israel Survivor players talking, because there's a bunch of anti-Israel Survivor players talking, and one of them happens to be a young, very attractive Iranian. But that's the exception to the rule. I generally find that the Iranians, and from what I understand, it's because they got the hell out of Dodge, and they want to be in a democratic society and to be nothing like theirs. So when I have patients in the hospital who are Muslim Iranians and they see my kippah, they say, "We love Jews, we love Israel," and I'm like, "You're not even Jewish. You're a Muslim saying this to me. I love it." And I so wish that somehow one day we can have this type of same thing coming from all of these other countries, whether it's Morocco, whether it's Egypt, whether it's Jordan, whether it's Lebanon. I mean, how great would it be? And of course, the irony of it all is that the Iranian regime is what's basically funding everything that's out there. So Abby, as you might be, I don't want to say, but you might be the only Iranian on the chat. Did anything that I just say? I don't want to speak for you.
No, and I know Noah can relate too. But
Noah as well.
It's so fascinating because I feel like you're 100% right. And like after October 7th, when everything was happening, I was shocked because my undergrad was at Emory University, and with a lot of the Iranians there, it's like once they found out I was Jewish, it was game over. And suddenly my dad, who was in the IDF, is like a crazy murderer. But recently, after all this is happening at Loyola, I found that the people who've had my back the most, and you're 100% right, are the Iranian non-Jews and Muslims. And it's very refreshing. And honestly, like, I mean, I'll let Noah speak, but it's just like really, it says a lot about the situation, like you said, for sure. And that experience can reflect who we are going forward and the way we see anything going forward in the world.
Yeah. And even amongst my, Persian friends and coworkers who are not Jewish, when the helicopter died, when Helicopter killed recently in Iran, I had a conversation just yesterday with a non-Jewish Persian coworker who's another nurse, and she was like, "Oh my God," we were like celebrating, bravo. We were like, "Thank God." And something that I wish Americans would understand more is they talk about Iran in just one sentence as if the population is the same as the regime. And that can work both directions, the double-edged sword. So either they're defending all of them in one, in which case people who are the population are like, don't lump me in with the government. I'm not like them. Don't say we're the same. We are not the same. They're suppressing us at all times. Or they lump them all as as being like the people, the other way around, right? So either they're all good or they're all bad. And the truth is, as just about, I don't know, 99% of Iranians, Persians, those words become interchangeable if you grew up in LA, move away, is they just want to truly be free. The people over there, we should be protesting with the women that have been protesting in Iran and getting killed all the time. They need so much more. My friend Tabby Raphael writes for the Jewish Journal. She's amazing, and she can't write enough about this, and people just don't listen. So we know that on the one side, and then we know on the one side that Iran is the big bad, but we need to remember that's the government is the big bad, not the people. The people are actually probably, if you throw a dart, fans of Israel more often than not. And that's the crazy part of it. There's so many, and if that's a generalization, but still. All right, I want to be able to move on from this, but Ada, it has to be fast because you look like you desperately want to say something.
I just want to shout out Coptic Egyptians, also big fans of Israel. If anyone knows Coptic Egyptians, they really love Israel. I don't know so many of them, but the ones I do know are very big fans of Israel.
And welcome to the Stereotype Generalization Chat brought to you by Boaz Hepner and Chosen Links. We will now talk about the types of foods that Latino people like. No, I'm kidding. All right, so moving on to safer waters. But thank you. But wait, before I move on though, because if Noah is also Iranian, did you have something you wanted to add or amend? Because it would be rude for me not to.
Oh, I mean, well, I think Abby covered a lot of it, but yeah, I mean, I guess I mean Iranians just really, or at least the ones outside of Iran, and I think most of them in Iran just really resent the regime and just want nothing to do with anything that the regime has anything to do with. But also they do. I think they do respect Israel in its own right and as a free country and maybe like sort of a model to be emulated. And then also like about what Ada was saying, I think anybody in the Middle East who has a reason to dislike like Arab nationalism or Islamism or Islamic nationalism will tend to like Israel or at least be sympathetic with it in some way. I actually wrote a paper on this in one of my classes about the Kurdish support for Israel in like Iraqi Kurdistan. So that does exist. There are pockets of the Middle East where you will find this, but it's like it's qualified with like it must be somewhere where Arab nationalism is like, no, we don't like that here. So it's more enemy of my enemy in a lot of cases,
which is fine.
But not always. It is a lot of time it is true respect for different places and culture in Israel.
Nothing wrong with enemy of my enemy. That's exactly why Israel almost had their normalization with Saudi Arabia, which was absolutely intentionally torpedoed by October 7th. Iran did not want the enemy of my enemy to happen, right? I don't think it's much of a conspiracy theory to know that we were very close to having that happen, so they disrupted. And it was very clever, unfortunately. But hopefully we will get back to that normalization soon.
That's how the Abraham Accords happened also. They had normalization with the UAEs because they both had both common enemy of Iran.
Exactly. And that's probably Israel's biggest enemy. Iran also ends up probably being its biggest pivot to help it make peace with more nations than it ever had before, because they know that Israel can provide them a lot of resources and help, even if they hate Israel's guts, because they are more fearful and more angry at Iran. So it's pretty interesting and scary and disturbing, but interesting. What do you guys give some advice? Be constructive now. High school students, parents, they are probably some of the most interested people in watching this. Give some constructive advice as to what they should be doing over the next couple of years. And this is pretty much every year of high school, but especially junior, senior year, right? All right. Yuval, you definitely had your hand up before it even was asked, so go ahead.
Find a school that exhibits true pluralism and tolerance for different opinions. And the way to do it is go and study at a red city in a blue state or a blue city in a red state. Austin, Texas, for example, where people actually meet daily everyday people with very different opinions than their own, and they develop this muscle of tolerance towards other opinions that might be very, very different than what they believe in. Go study there.
Very interesting. I didn't actually predict where you were going when you said red city, blue state, blue city, red state. That's very interesting. I have to think about that. That's really cool. Angelina, who's using virtual and real hands.
Yes, I'm raising so many hands. I don't know how to unraise this. Oh no, now I have like 4 hands up. Okay. I think my biggest thing, if like going back and looking when I was applying to schools, I would definitely look at the Jewish communities. I don't know if I think a lot of us didn't we couldn't anticipate what would happen, and I would definitely look at schools with stronger Jewish communities, because even if these protests break out again, God forbid, or like encampments, whatever, the stronger community you have, the easier it is to combat it, or to fight it, or to like even stand up. And I definitely think that looking at colleges, it's something a lot of public school is not going to tell you to like look at a school for has a good Jewish community or whatever. But I definitely think that people are waking up and realizing that that's very important now during these times, whether it's Chabad, Hillel, Stand With Us presence, whatever. I think it's very important.
Thank you. Yeah, and Hillel and Chabad's definitely need a shout out, because I would not want to be running those things right now, but they are kind of the Ir Miklats right now. For those of you who know the Jewish term, they're cities of refuge right now for a lot of you guys, I'm sure. Ezra, you pretty quickly had your hand up.
Yeah. No, sure. A quick story. And we should call it a story. But I think it was like February time, when we had Rabbi Matanki, the dean of Eider Crown Jewish Academy in Chicago, my alma mater. He came down to campus to speak to us, and he told us that there is a big debate amongst the yeshiva high schools across America as to whether they should be advising parents to send their kids to secular college or YU. And his conclusion was that now is the time for Jewish high school students to go to secular college and like advocate for the Jewish community. Because like, imagine if they said everyone should go to YU and Jews didn't attend secular college. Imagine how much worse the situation on campus would be. Right? There'd be nobody to speak up for us.
Yeah, I've read good articles which have specifically been counterpoint of go to the places with all of the Jewish population and protect yourselves, and then ones that are literally saying the opposite, saying no, you're basically screwing up things even worse and just making the bad ones even worse rather than making the bad ones better. So it's interesting, but the question is, how many people are okay sending their kids to be like the sacrificial lamb so that it'll be better? I don't judge people either way on this. Jacob, go ahead. Our winner, our crown winner. By the way, Jacob, did you enjoy the Miss America song for the pageantry? That was important.
Beautiful. It was really beautiful. Thank you for writing it. Yes. I would probably say
it was ChatGPT, by the way.
ChatGPT. Everyone knows that it's the best for artistic.
Me and I.
So it's become more common for people to say that this generation is now no longer Jews with trembling knees. And I think that's a pretty significant thing that we should continue to keep up with as we move on with our lives, and especially for high schoolers who are going to come into college now. I think that beyond having a Jewish community on campus, it's nice having 10, 20, 30, 100 Jewish students. Honestly, I would say that me and 2 of my friends at school have done more than the next 99 Jewish students combined. So you ultimately need 1 or 2 people who care. That's all you really need. But what is more influential than anything else is either having community member support in the area, having donor support at the university, or having professor support there. Luckily at UCSD, I don't know how familiar you guys are, but the guy who founded Qualcomm is a San Diego Jew named Erwin Jacobs, and he donated like 3/4 of the school. And we have like significant billionaire support, which we control the banks. Like, you got to be careful with how much you use what you use. but especially you need some people who are on the board of trustees. You need people who are professors in the administration who can at least get your back, because it's going to be a wild goose chase if you and your friends are trying to figure out who to talk to and there's no one up above who you can actually aim it towards. So in this day and age, just go anywhere that you can at least have some fighting chance. It doesn't matter how many Jews there are. It's nice to have some community for Shabbat at least or something else, but you want to just try to be around a community of people with influence more than a community of students.
Interesting thing that I want to ask you to clarify on. Let's just say you are a population of 100, as you say, and there's one or two that are actually like doing the work and the influence. Are those one or two students who are doing the work getting the brunt of the attack, or does the brunt of the attack pretty much equally go to the ones who are also not really doing much anyway?
Goes to everybody. Goes to absolutely everybody. No one doesn't suffer it. If you're even remotely involved, you're going to see it. And it's just commonplace right now everywhere. So everyone will suffer it, but then those 99% of the people will complain to us 1%, and then us 1% are the ones who actually have to do something about it.
So in reality, would you give advice to say you may as well be part of that 1% because you're gonna be found guilty anyway by those who hate us, so you may as well just be proactive?
I would say we should change it from being 1% to being 100%. And every single person who is a Jew needs to be as involved as possible, as outspoken as possible, and as contributing to our cause as possible.
Interesting. All right. Well, Abby, you've had your hand up for a while. I'm curious what you wanted to say. Is it Abby, by the way, or is it pronounced differently? Yeah. Okay, good. My sister.
And then it's Abigail, and then it's Abby.
Right. Same as my sister. My sister is Abigail and Abby. Go ahead.
Well, kind of what Jacob was saying, but also on an everything note with Angelina too. Like, if there's anything I've learned, it's like the amount of Jewish people where you're at can only matter so much. And like, wherever you go, we're gonna find hate. If anything, there's anything that we've learned in this time, it's that. So I feel like my advice would be to find the us on your campus. Like, find someone you can look up to. Find a senior who is at Hillel every day. Find someone who you feel you can learn from and who can protect you, because I feel like yes, of course, all the things you're saying matter, and like it matters that you go to a more Jewish, highly populated school or whatever, but I do feel like finding the us is what will make you feel safe and comfortable and seen and heard, so that we can be the 1%. And also that I feel like, just like on an emotional level, dealing with anti-Semitism, whether it's like one-on-one or big protests, is the most isolating feeling on earth. Even when there's a lot of us, we're all very spread out, unfortunately, and there aren't actually that many of us. So finding the us is like the best advice I can give, because we know that we have each other's backs, but no one else really does. And unfortunately, that's something we've had to learn. So yeah.
Yeah, aren't we something like 2% of America and 0.2% of the world? Isn't that what a statistic is? It's pretty mind-boggling. And then, of course, they will just hear that statistic and say, and see, that little percentage is the ones that, control things.
Of course.
I would like to, and I hope nobody feels dissed when I move on for things, because it's obviously physically impossible for everybody to answer everything. And I would actually like to hear from Nani, because we really haven't heard from you. And I want to ask you a question. I have a friend who was just recently honored locally, who is a Jew of color. And what he wanted to know, since he's not a college student, is he wanted to know about Jews of color on college campuses. What is your experience like as opposed to everybody else who is Jewish but not seen as a Jew of color? Do you find a massive difference?
I do personally, not necessarily on campus. My campus is actually pretty mild. More so online. I find that a lot of the pro-Hamas, pro-Palestine, whatever you want to call it, rhetoric is very hypocritical, obviously, but there's a lot of like racism mixed in with the anti-Semitism. So like existing at this intersection has been very interesting, to put it that way. So like online, I had to delete my old Instagram account. I have a new one now because of the creativity, let's put it that way, of what people would come up with in terms of expressing their discontent for my Zionism, if that makes sense.
Are you
But
seen as
on
a,
my college campus,
are you seen as a race traitor by people
sorry.
who are of color but not Jewish for being Zionist?
To an extent, yeah. Because what I find is that when people look at like Israel-Palestine, especially in an American context, they look at it as white versus black or oppressor and oppressed. And given obviously this country's history, and then you're looking at something that is not a Western issue from a Western lens, I mean, that's what's conflated with that. But yeah, I would say so for sure. So it's very kind of hard to exist. But here I am. Yeah, I would say I've felt more so like on campus, I'm perfectly fine. I have my community. I, have who I stand with, and obviously I'm here. But I would say in the context of just in general existing as like a Black person, but also as a Jewish person, then also as a Zionist, it's a very interesting combo. So
Interesting.
yeah.
Well, you might be interested. You might be interested to know that I'm with my friend who himself is influential, and he's LGBTQ and very Zionist and a Jew of color. He sort of checks a lot of different boxes. He's an amazing guy, and he's going to be moderating with me a future one that we're going to put together that's going to be with Jews of color, and even a separate one, because I asked him, should we also do allies? And he said actually what will be more interesting is we're going to have a separate one that's just for Black Jews of color and Black non-Jewish allies, because the whole everything with once we get into the whole idea of specifically Black, not just Jews of color, will have its own interesting conversations. So you might be very interested in that. And from what we were talking about before, just to jump back to when we talked to Abby about not to ask Abby, to Abby and Noah about Iran. I'm going to be, when we're talking about regimes and other people that want regime change and so on, I'm going to be doing an entire other chat with a bunch of influential Palestinians who have been speaking out against Hamas. And that's going to be a very challenging one for me, because I'm planning on being a moderator, and I've befriended all of them, but they don't all have kind things to say about Israel. I'm not going to be sitting there and disagreeing with them if they say Israel is committing war crimes or Israel is this or that. But I consider their voices extremely valuable because they are speaking out unapologetically, extremely against their regime, against Hamas, against the PA, against, pay for slay, and for a two-state solution. So, there's all of these different conversations that can be interesting in their own ways, and each one poses its own challenge, but I think they're all very important. And I think having this with you guys today is extremely important. I'm very curious what you guys are going to end up finding to be most, your biggest takeaway from today. And we're not done. This isn't my wrap up, but we started off with a silly comedic thing, which I thought would be a very obvious favorite, because it's sort of fun, and we got to see lots and lots of what's happened on your campuses, and we got to ask legal from StandWithUs, which was really helpful, getting free legal counsel. But I don't know. I feel like a lot of people might actually really enjoy this most, because this is just a straight up conversation with each other, which we really need to be having more of. And I like that we're doing this from across the country with each other. Now, have any of you actually seen repercussions happening to the faculty, to the administration, to the students who are, let's ignore ones who might have committed actual acts of violence, but is there anything going on that's actually going to be meaningful to this inherent anti-Israel fomented pro-BDS thing? Is BDS going anywhere? Is the BDS movement going anywhere positive from our points of view, from what you're seeing on any of your college campuses, where they're just saying, screw this, you're not going to continue, you're not going to get tenure if you're going to keep teaching this shit, that type of thing? I know I'm asking kind of a few different sidestepping things, but I'm curious. This question came from somebody else in the community. Go ahead, Angelina.
So I go to a very small school in New York, so you probably haven't heard what happened on my campus. But the last week of school, 200 students and faculty members got arrested on our encampment. When they got arrested it was a code of conduct violation. So finally, after a year of fighting, we're seeing students losing privileges. Like they can't be RAs, they can't be peer leaders like during orientation, they can't be certain leadership positions in student government, all because they were at this encampment and protest and got arrested. As far as faculty, there was a huge movement to protect the faculty that were arrested. From what I know, nothing has happened, but also at my school, BDS came from the faculty actually, and not even the students, which was very alarming as a student on campus. But these things kind of happened towards the end of the semester. So like everything kind of blowed over. But I definitely think it's, very upsetting that it took, when I say violent, I mean more like with words than like physical, but like a violent encampment in order to see any kind of justice happen all year. So I don't know if anyone else like had like arrests on their campus, but it definitely was very intimidating. It was very scary. And faculty being involved is definitely very it's like an uphill battle. It makes it 10 times harder when it's coming from the higher up, because then the power dynamic comes into play. How can you go against the people running the school?
I've actually been curious. Are the arrests at the end of the day something that are helping quell things big picture for you? Or do the arrests actually do kind of, if you think about like criminals, when you get arrested and anything, and now they're just going to come back and be more resentful, and it's like you're the reason they got arrested and free speech? And
So I think the arrest did way more harm than good. Me personally, I was blamed for the arrest. So there was a whole anti-Angelina campaign because I whined on Instagram about the encampment. And I got all of the Zionist moms to call the school in order to bring in the state troopers. And they thought I called the state troopers in. And my response was, if I had the state troopers on speed dial, I would have called like weeks ago. I wouldn't have waited this long. But also, it definitely it shifted towards a police brutality protest on my campus now, which then brings in the whole question of race, police in America. It's so far from the plot, and it's definitely doing way more harm than good, because now we're bringing in all these other issues, and now Jews are to blame for police brutality, for racism, for violence, for this. Not only just the Palestinian movement. Now we're to blame for the way the police are acting. So it's
a lose-lose situation. It sounds like. So definitely. It kills. I want to keep being able to call on everybody, because you all have good things to say. But what the hell do any of you have an idea of what should happen? Like, are we better off? Like, it sounds like it make it worse, big picture, to have them arrested. But on the other hand, if we don't, we're literally allowing people you were saying, well, it's violent, but it's not just violent, it's with words. Hey, let's remember the true meaning of assault is all words. It's assault and battery. Battery is the one where you're hitting the person. Assault is the one where you say, I'm gonna hit you. What they're doing on these campuses had some battery, but it was plentiful of assault. So I would really like to know, though, it feels like a lose-lose situation. You guys educate me. What would you do if you were in charge? How the hell would you deal with this? Noah, you were trying to answer it already before this. Please, I need to know.
Well, I'm going to bring up a conversation I had with a professor who one of my professors who studies revolutions and terrorism as his specialty, and he compared the president of our school to the Shah of Iran, actually, to bring in Iran again. And he said the problem with the administration is what they've kind of been, and with the Shah of Iran in 1979, was that they kind of flip-flop, and they have these cycles of coming down hard on them and like punishing them, and that happens with when you have arrests and suspensions and things like that, and then also sort of like embracing them and trying to appease them. And he says you can't do that. You either have to appease them, or you have to come out in the beginning like saying no, like we're not tolerating this. So that might suggest, is it too late for them to do something about this? Has it already reached the point where any disciplinary action will just be met by more and more resistance, which is what happened at my school, at least. When they finally cracked down and said, all right, enough is enough. It just got worse after that. So I don't know. I think maybe I don't know if there is a solution right now that they could do, but at least for the next time, there might be an idea now of cut this off as soon as you can and make it very clear what your policy is in the beginning before the stuff before it starts escalating and you've already made exchanges and embraced them and said things to them that have empowered them.
I thought we already know what the solution is. They always say intifada revolution, right? Isn't that the champion?
Of course, yeah, that's correct.
You're never going to be able to take all the comedy out of me, no matter what we talk about. I'll make Holocaust jokes. I'm sorry. So I do want to hear actually a couple more answers to this, because I really do want to know what I feel. I do feel backed into a corner with this. I think you all do to some degree. So I want to get like two more of you to be able to answer this. So, Ethan, because we haven't heard from you in barely at all, and Jacob, because you've been raising your hand forever. And then, so go ahead, Ethan.
It's simple. You violate the school code of conduct, you get suspended. Should you violate it further and again, you get expelled. It's as simple as that. I think that's an obvious solution. When you join the university, you agree to the code of conduct of the school, and you're choosing to go and violate the code of conduct, you should not receive the privilege of being a student of that university. Sorry.
So in other words, the answer is not with the cops. The answer is the university needs to pull up their big boy pants and do what their code of conduct is telling them to do. Got a lot of nod. I think there was a pretty big consensus with what you just said over there. That's pretty interesting. Did you still want to say something? One last thing though, Jacob? It was going to be you or Nani.
No, that
covered you. Did that cover you as well, Nani? Okay, yeah, okay. So well said then, apparently. So thank you. That's a good point. We forget at the end of the day that we're watching the cops come and clean up the mess and potentially make it worse and foment more hate. And then, like, wait a second, why is the school not dealing with it themselves? Although we did hear earlier that some of the schools did. Yeah, Ezra, you wanted to clarify something?
Yeah, a couple things. So I'm actually on the committee for student discipline at my university, and like I heard what they talked about, how they talked about the encampment, and it sounded like they thought maybe they just need a slap on the wrist. But a point that I've been making to some people for months now is when you attend the University of Illinois as a freshman, right? They make you take like this like sexual assault course and all these different courses, and if you don't take them, you can't register for classes the next semester. The university also has student code. There's a lot to learn in that student code. Where can you hang up flyers? What's disorderly conduct? All that. Why isn't there some requirement that students need to know student code? Like why some professors will create a syllabus quiz to make sure their students read the syllabus and know what's on it. Why can't the university do something similar so you don't have students violating student code willy-nilly, putting other students' safety at risk?
Do you guys feel optimistic that schools are moving in the direction of modifying their code of conduct and enforcing things so that this stuff won't happen again in the future? Or do you think they're ish, sort of overall, just sort of ish? Some yes, some more, and so on. Okay. I want to move to other questions though, unless you want to say something really quickly.
Yeah, I want to say a couple of things really quickly. One is the importance of education, and that's a long process, just like what Ezra said. And I think it also relates to our previous discussion about the word antisemitism. I bet none of us really know what it is or correctly can define it. I know I couldn't up until the last few months, and I bet most of us here cannot. The second is, I once had a cavity and I ignored it, and it ended with a root canal. So discipline your students when they break the rules and do it early.
It's a funny analogy, but yeah. Interesting to see. So of the people who are left, I don't know if there's anybody here who's hidden in the chat now. People are, going, a lot of people on the East Coast. But so what do we have? We have, in terms of, this is mostly now, we have, I think, 2 Chicago and 1 Florida, and everybody else is New York or California, right? It's pretty interesting. Now, is it fair to say that the giant population, like why is it that the worst seems to be constantly coming out of California and New York? Maybe Chicago would also fit in there. Similarly, do we, without trying to make it too much in terms of politics, I mean, is it coming down to just basically being like the more urban you are? Is it about being the more of a blue state that it is? Is that what it is? Max, you were immediately.
So I go to school in Florida, but I'm originally from New Jersey, so I'm very familiar and have lots of friends at these schools. And I don't necessarily think it's what side of the political spectrum you're on. It's more of your moral clarity and consistency in your rhetoric when it comes to the issue. So I go to school, University of South Florida is in Tampa. And up until, the state government got involved, it was pretty bad on our campus. It was, the administration was not helping. Eventually, the government got involved and it got a little better. They arrested people. I think a big thing is more, if you are going to have inconsistent messaging, you're not going to be clear on, you're going to make these equivalencies between the Palestine protests, or you're going to make these equivalencies between them and when Jewish people, for example, people love to point to what happened at UCLA. And they'll make these, points. Oh, I found an example of, pro-Israel protesters, agitating. People love to point to examples and they tokenize them and they make these equivalencies when obviously the scaling, it is much worse on one side than the other. And there's amazing people on all sides that are speaking. I mean, I can think, we're saying it was a left issue, but I mean, John Fetterman's been amazing. There's tons of voices that are very clear, and in areas where the speech is clear from higher ups, that's where it's the best and there's the most uniform response. Because once you let it fester, once you kind of let them get that hold on you, that you give an inch, you give up a mile. That's essentially what ends up happening at these institutions in these areas.
Yeah, I was glad to see why you just honor John Fetterman. The guy deserves some accolades. Pretty insane how supportive he's been. Aiden?
I think where there's more Jews, there's also a lot more Jew hatred. SJP likes to have hotbeds in New York. They have a lot of presence there. They have a lot of presence in Southern California. I think that's where it just ends up happening. I mean, we can say like some other places as well, like Chicago, Florida, but like I think just sometimes it happens where when there's more Jews, there also tends to be more Jew hatred. That's just I just don't know how that works, but it's
you brought up SJP. I want to ask, do you guys have any sense? I'm praying that SJP just goes the hell away, because there's just so much ridiculous amounts of evidence that they're literally being funded by all the wrong people and supporting all the wrong people. We certainly know. So is there any sense that we're getting? I guess this would have been a good question to have asked Carly over there from StandWithUs, but do we have any sense of whether or not SJP is going anywhere in the right direction from our points of view, or if they're just getting more power from the schools, not from themselves, the schools?
So I've seen a lot at my campus, and I also work very closely with UC Irvine, which has been in the news quite a lot recently. At UC Irvine, I can speak for them. SJP has been suspended. They were suspended, I think it was a couple months ago, when they stormed the lecture hall, and then there's been more issues ever since. So they have a continuous record and obvious record of escalating and becoming worse. And as the university enacts and takes action against them or their students, so it just snowballs into the fact of them escalating and calling for the UC Intifada, whatever they want to call it. So I think they're gaining traction in terms of, I think it goes both ways. A lot of people, as it escalates, they're seeing that their movement has reached levels of extremism that it shouldn't. But at the same time, the people who are staunch and are strong for the movement, they're becoming more radical. So I think you're seeing less people, but more radical, which I think is less safe in my opinion.
Okay. Nani?
I would say that, I mean, they just exist. Like on my campus, they were banned in 2018. They were suspended for harassing visibly Jewish students. But since October 7th, they've come back online, and they've grown in numbers. And what they'll do is they will basically leech onto registered campus organizations and have their events through them. So whether it's getting better or not, I don't know. I think they just find ways to infiltrate in whatever way they can. And I mean, luckily, my administration has been very swift, especially with the encampments. They shut that down within 2 days. But also, they kind of had to because we had our Hillel had an event in the space that they were occupying. Um, but yeah, I don't know if it's getting worse or better. I would say they just keep finding ways to slither in whatever way they can.
Is it fair to say, I just did this. Is it fair to say though that SJP is from a virtue signaling point of view and so on, is it more popular and easier to be allies with them than with Hillels from non-Jewish perspective on campus?
At least from what I've seen, yes, because I mean, there are people literally boycotting Hillels. Like I have friends that go to Baruch where they're calling for them to be banded and kicked off campus. Again, I think it's a trend, so it's easy to align with what's right, stand on the right side of history. And if that's what your market is at this point in your life, then most people, unfortunately, are joining that. So.
Okay, so let's talk now to all of you guys about, rather than the SJP, let's talk about the administration. Now, do you feel like the administrations in your colleges and in colleges in general, was this a wake-up call to them at all that they need to start having a more diverse faculty? And when I say diverse, I mean like pro-Israel faculty too, to balance out all of the more Marxist ones. Or has nobody woken up? Doesn't matter if it's a Liz McGill campus or it doesn't matter where it is. That where are we in terms of our outlook, in terms of the big? I wouldn't say the root of the problem, because there's different roots of the problems, right? There's Qatar money as a big root of the problem. There's social media confirmation bias, which is a big root of the problem. But there's certainly the very, very, very anti-Israel teaching that's by the professors. That's the root of a problem. So let's focus on that third one. Are these campuses going in the right direction? Was this a wake-up call, or are they just going to keep having the same faculty over and over again that are like 90% anti-Israel? Noah.
Well, I think the problem is that you have, I think, at least on my campus, the administration is I think is kind of sympathetic to us, and I think they do wish it was that way, where they could have more diverse faculty in terms of viewpoint. But the problem is the departments are the ones who hire the faculty, so it's like a vicious cycle of you hire another anti-Israel professor, and now the anti-Israel ranks are boosted in, for example, say, I don't know, the anthropology department. I mean, that one was already pretty far gone to begin with. But then now there's more people who want to hire another professor who's anti-Israel, and they don't hire them because they're anti-Israel. But a lot in, like, especially the social sciences and humanities, a lot of the popular discourse now, a lot of the popular academic discourse is kind of like global, critical, kind of leaning left-wing Marxist type thinking, and that invariably is going to attract anti-Israel people. So I do think the school wishes that it was that way, but the way that hiring people works, it just kind of makes it a cycle where people it's hard to break. It's hard to force people to change how they hire, and also it's hard to get rid of. You can't get rid of tenured professors. The only way to do that is dissolving a department, and they're not going to do that. So in most cases, so I think there's kind of a structural barrier to solving that problem.
Because we're getting around the 3-hour mark, and because I feel guilty for those of you who want to stay on no matter how late it goes, the most common question I was asked, like maybe 20 different people asked, were variations of the following, and they want to know, what can we, whoever they are, do to help you college students? This is variations of non-Jewish allies, what could they be doing in theory? Your Jewish allies, what could they be doing as a community? And they're saying, should we be sending money? Should we be staying the F out? Should we not be getting our nose in it? Should we be sending you supplies? Should we be making phone calls? What should we be doing? There's also, what should your synagogues be doing? What should rabbis be doing? These are all these are all branches of the same question, but so many people want to know this that I would actually kind of like all of you to answer this your own way. All of you. This is an important enough one. Literally, everybody had this question. I was just like, all right, I got that one already. So let's go ahead. We're going to start. We're just going to go around round robin with what I see. We're going to start with Ezra, then Max, then Aiden, then Nani, then Ethan, then Noah, then Angelina, because that's how you show up on my screen. So starting with you, Ezra, go right ahead.
All right. What should people be doing? Like people who aren't on campus, parents, community members, everybody. I have a vision for what I think Israel advocacy and education on my campus could look like. And my biggest hurdle right now for that is funding. Like I want to bring in some amazing speakers. I've had the pleasure of hearing speakers at other events, and I walk away from those events and just like, we need to get this person to campus. And some of them can be quite expensive. So if there's, I don't remember who said it before, maybe it was Aiden. If you have that one or two Jewish students who are driven to making something happen, so if you have that and a decent amount of funding, I think
resources.
Yeah.
Resources all the way.
Resources all the way. I think that's what's most important right now.
Okay. Thank you. Very good. Let's go. Let's try to keep this to about 30 seconds each, because then we can decide what to do. Go ahead, Max. I think you were next.
Anything you can do to give. I mean, whether you're giving to the organizations, Chabad and Hillel has been mentioned. There's certain Greek organizations, Alpha Epsilon Pi, Sigma Delta Tau, Zeta Beta Tau. There's many organizations like that you can give to the ADL. That's certainly helpful. I think one thing that isn't talked about as much is if you're a member of any organization or any group or have any connections that are non-Jewish and you can get them to do partnered events, that legitimization is the biggest thing we've lost. Is organizations are scared to partner with the Hillels, the Chabads, the AEPIs, not because they're anti-Semitic, but because they're fear of the backlash. So if we can prove that no one's scared of them, that will be the biggest thing that will get them away. Because honestly, people are just scared of the mob. If you have any connections, build on that.
Very cool. Nani, you were nodding in agreement, and go ahead. You can say your own thing.
Yeah, I was going to say funding first and foremost, and that could be, I guess, going off the resources thing, whether that's just money given for events where we're just literally getting together just so that we can see each other and see that we're all here for each other, or like psychological services, because I know some people just like have been like, I'm traumatized. I'm not gonna lie, I'm traumatized. That, or what was I gonna say? Oh my goodness, I'm forgetting. So I know we're short on time, but something just to show that there are people not only within the community that stand with us, but even outside. I exist at many different intersections, as we can all see. And some of those, like, it's very hard because majority of like the Black community, for example, is very pro-Palestine. And then here comes me. So I guess having that sort of partnership, allyship, whatever form that takes would be great. Because again, I'm supposedly a white colonizer, but I don't exist there. So I guess seeing other people in the same boat that look like me, great. So yeah.
Absolutely. Okay. Keep it going around. I think it was you, Aiden.
One thing besides funding is like having the community members come to the events. So I obviously hosting a huge panel, wanted to get a lot of community members to listen and hear from these amazing speakers. So I made it open to the public. It's a huge thing, and it gets the community like more to on campus, understanding campus issues. And then in turn, that will help community members also like advocate for you and be stronger in numbers. So like they'll also end up reaching out to administration if something like big happens. Like that's a really huge thing. Also, not only just them reaching out to administration, they'll also reach out to like local government, and then like they can step into, which is like really helpful because as a student, like you don't also have like all the time in the world to go like call like your local rep or something. And I just found that like really important, just connections and things like that. So
yeah, and some of those things can be done very quickly and very easily. Just have to take the time to do it. Ethan?
So firstly, funding is the obvious one to start with, but there's a couple things too. If we are inviting community members, I urge community members to listen to what the students are requesting of them. Very often, sometimes they think that they know what the students want, but we know exactly how our campus is running, how what backlash we will face. So it's important that the community members understand that we have to live with these other people, perpetrators on our campus, try and work with us so that we can make it bigger. And the second thing I'll say is follow Jewish creators online. See what's happening on the campuses. There's a lot of Jewish creators who are posting what's happening on the campuses day in and day out. And what really gets fumbles the administration and government a lot is an overwhelming amount of viral videos, an overwhelming amount of pressure on the university when things are getting rough. So the more pressure, the more viral you make something bad that happens, the more pressure you're putting on the university, on the government, and that will then create change.
Noah?
I mean, a lot's been said already, and I agree with everything. But I think for one, donations funding is very helpful always. Listening to people who are on campus, also like Ethan was saying, is very important, and also talking to them and reassuring them that they're supported and that that brings a lot of hope a lot of the time, and trying to let them know that they should be proud of who they are and not be afraid, and that there are lots of people behind them is I've seen it help a lot of people sort of be uplifted after they experience some negative things. So that's what I'd say.
Thank you. And then Angelina.
So I have two things. My first thing is connections. If you're a lawyer or something, like I know a lot of my friends have been doxxed and needed help outside of what the school can provide, and people were able to get in touch or this. And I definitely think what Aiden and everyone else said about community members, the most helpful thing for me has been seeing people from the college town that I go to come and show support, whether it's a student supporting Israel event or coming to Shabbat dinner, or just to know that there's people in the area that care and aren't, mad or angry with us. And maybe I spend too much time at Chabad, but I'm going to give a little bit of a Chabad answer. But I definitely think really investing in the Jewish culture on campus. I know I've definitely taken a role in Israel advocacy, but you can't do that without forgetting, why are we fighting for Israel? It's because I'm assuming most of us, if not all of us, are Jewish, and that's why we feel so strong about it. And so often we get wrapped up in the Hasbara and the media and this, and we forget like we're Jewish at the end of the day. So like I always tell people, I can figure out the Instagram, fighting for Israel, but sponsor Shabbat dinner, sponsor someone to get their first pair of tefillin, keep that energy going. Because if we don't have like our Judaism, like why are we fighting for Israel? So I think we need to touch back in that. And you mentioned like, how can rabbis get involved? I think they're doing a great job as hard of a time it is right now, but definitely to still be in touch with that. As important as it is to fight for Israel, we have to remember why and who we are. So I think to really
help us connect to our Judaism. That's very interesting. There's a statement that somebody made. It's a question, but it starts with a statement that I actually thought was very well thought out. So I'm going to say this and I am going to ask this. And it relates to what you guys were actually talking about, what I believe Max said. So the fact that so many other intersectional groups have become rabidly anti-Israel is counterintuitive, because Jews should be natural allies with the Black community due to our common fight for civil rights over the years, with the Native American community, given our common identity as Indigenous people fighting for self-determination, with the LGBTQ community, given Israel having one of the largest and pride parades in the world and being the most tolerant in the Middle East by far of people, regardless of their sexuality. Yet somehow the anti-Israel crowd has been able to invert those relationships. Are any of you guys doing anything to reverse this trend, to forge our own coalitions with other groups? I thought that was a really interesting statement. And I'm wondering if any of you, not even necessarily you're doing something, but that at least you know something is being done that you think is proactive. I think this is a good and important question. So go ahead, Nani.
Okay, so obviously I exist in the Black community as well. For me, I'm most people's and like my family and in like family friends, I'm most of their education. A lot of people really don't care, but because of like the media and because of how much it's talked about, suddenly everyone knows everything that there is to know. So I think for me, just having those conversations and basically debunking, excuse me, a lot of lies that are spread or just misinformation slash disinformation is something that I focused on. So for example, I remember someone mentioned the conflation of the IDF, not the IDF, but all of the police activity on college campuses regarding like the pro-Hamas slash anti-Israel rhetoric and encampments that have been occurring with police brutality. And I mean, it's really simple to break that down. I mean, a lot of people, for them, their history of this conflict begins in 1948. So when you're going to conflate the American police force, which is really KKK based, which has existed since, I don't know, prior to Israel's reestablishment, that basically takes the blame off them. Like it's a whole thing. But for me, basically to answer the question, is just having those conversations on my end. So yeah.
Thank you for having those conversations. And I didn't want to interrupt you earlier, but I do want to just acknowledge that you are without question, I'm not going to ask people to raise their hands on this, but you are without question not the only person who is on this chat that is suffering trauma and PTSD from this. And you are absolutely, I mean, it might be cliche to say, but you are not alone. My own wife wouldn't mind me saying, my wife who went to UCSD, right, which was crowned today, my wife, she might not even watch this. And I'm okay with that. We have our own ways of coping, and that's okay. My way of coping is by being proactive, like a lot of you guys. That's my way of coping. I know that I have to do something because if I don't, I'm going to go crazy. And I know I'm a good writer, and I know when I have a voice, I'm a good speaker, and I know that I have the ability to be able to do something. And so I need to do that. And it gives me a sense of control. And for some of us, that's for sure the case, because a lot of you guys, to buy a sample size by wanting to be on this, you are not people that are, you're not wallflowers. But on the other hand, there's a lot of people out there like my wife who are like, she needs to shut it out. She cannot read and then the things. I can be proud of an article that I just wrote, and it doesn't even mean that she's going to read it. And I'm okay with that because it's really just anxiety ridden. And, people should not all be doom scrolling all day long. So whether you are somebody who is dealing with it one way or the other, a lot of us have PTSD from this and will for a long time. So thank you for mentioning that before. I didn't want to gloss over that. I appreciate that. And I think we all do. I want to get at least one more person though to talk about this important question. Hopefully you thought it was a worthy statement that he made. So Max, I think we haven't heard from you for a little longer. Go ahead.
Something that actually my Hillel director had told me when I had asked her this question, because this is something I brought up a lot, is that you can't build allyship when you're in a crisis. It's something you have to have put in the work before. And it's something I'm very proud, at least in my short time, I'm going into my junior year, so about a year before October 7th, that we had really worked to build that in my Hillel and Chabad community, specifically with Hillel. I'm a member of our Israel Advocacy Board, and we have a Pride event. We bring a large contingent to the Tampa Pride. We co-host events with that. So just serving our community is something that's really important. we happen as a Hillel to have a great building on campus that a lot of other student groups don't. So allowing them to maybe co-host an event at that building, share our resources and show, even in times of strength, even when, anti-Semitism isn't the top issue on the news like it is right now, unfortunately, building it then so that the roots are strong for when you need it. That's how you really build it. So for people that don't have it, it might be a difficult time. I think you can still build those roots, but just kind of trying to lean on that and serve others is the way you do it. Because once you start serving others, it'll come back to you.
I think I want to finish with a very simple question for you guys. It's kind of, I regret that I didn't ask this early on because it would have been a good one to have like hand raises just to see a consensus. But out of you guys, do you sense are more people, sort of like how I asked before, are more people in the protesting group, ignorant versus not? Now let's talk about Jews. Are more people in the camp of Jews who are now the new generation that are loud and proud, which I think it's less about you and more about what you think on campus, because you guys are all loud and proud. That's why you're on this. Are you sensing that more people are taking out the Magen David and putting it on their neck, or are more people tucking it away now? That's basically the idea I'm trying to get from. What do you guys think? Not about yourselves, but where is this going now for more people that you see on campus? Prouder as Jews, loud and proud, or terrified of what the repercussions are, don't want to get killed? And I'm not judging either person. What do you guys think? Turn. There's not that many people left. Go ahead, take off your mics. We can just make this a little messy.
I think it's a good mixture of both. I found like a lot of people who weren't like, they were Jewish, so whatever, it didn't mean much to them. But after they've seen all the vicious hate, they've decided that they don't want to be hidden anymore. They I don't want to say instigating, but they want to exist and they want to be proud of their existence. On the other hand, there are people who are more fearful. And then I feel like it's a balance of both. It depends on the timing. So on a time where the campus is kind of more tame, there isn't much happening, people are more on the lax, like it's being Jewish is a part of their identity, but it's not their core everything. But then, for example, when an encampment comes or there's a riot or something happens, that's when people start to take out their stars again and be more proud of it once there is the polar opposite hate on the other side, which I think is a very nice contrast to what we saw 50, 80 years ago.
I think we're starting to see a time where more people are proud and definitely loud. At least not even just like some of us here. I think like I saw when there started to be protests on my campus, more people who really weren't talking about the issue as much as I was came to support me and showed their Jewishness like very visibly, which was definitely like a little surprising, but like I think we're starting to see like more loud and proud across the spectrum of people, even if they weren't that religious.
I think a lot of people are they're finding that connection to the religion in a new way, or the new connection to the culture in a way they haven't before. And people who might not have been as engaged or might not have been as educated specifically on the Israel advocacy side have kind of seen the importance of it. I do think one thing that's sad though, and kind of to speak to the other side, is a lot of people, at least in my school, and I'm sure across the world, a big thing for people is to wear, this Star of David, this necklace. This is a huge thing for me. I got this when I was on birthright. Like I don't take it off. I love wearing this thing. It makes, I feel connected to it. I have multiple friends who've been told by their parents, you are not, like, I'm helping you pay for school. You are not wearing this on campus. It's not safe. And I do think there's that kind of juxtaposition where people are feeling more Jewish and feeling more proud of it than ever, but they're also feeling more scared, specifically on college campuses than ever. So it's a weird juxtaposition, but I do think people are, finding those communities.
I don't judge either side. I can get it. Right? How can we not get both ways? We were just like, be loud and proud. And at the same time, it's like, survive. Like, you can't ask everybody to be a martyr. And none of us, and it's pathetic that you have to even, why would I even have to bring up the word martyr when we're talking about wearing a Magen David, a Star of David around your neck? Like, that shouldn't go hand in hand. But nowadays we are all taking on risks, and we do that. Somebody drove by me today on the car and gave me the finger as they went by, and of course first thing you have to think to yourself is like, well, is this the reason? Is this why this just happened? It's just sad. And even when it's not the reason, now that's the first place we go, right? First place we're going to think right away is like, oh, it probably is. So it's kind of scary. I can't say enough how meaningful this is that you guys came. I can't believe that any of you guys from the East Coast are still in this. I mean, my goodness, I expected this to be mostly at the end, me and California people, which is Ethan. But look at this. I've got Ezra 2 hours ahead of us. So you're at 12:30 in the morning, and Aiden, Max, and Nani, you guys, it's 1:30 in the morning there. So I just want to point that out for people that are watching this in a few days or in a few weeks, that you guys really stuck with it. And I thank you for your time, truly. I thank David and Avram for their time for doing the video recording for this as well. And thank you, David, for showing yourself. Very kind of you. I think honestly, this is very, very cool of all of you. I don't do this in case any of you don't know. I don't get paid 1 penny for this. This is just my passion, just like for all of you guys, it's your passion. So thank you. But hopefully I'll help make you famous.
All right. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Be well. Stay safe, please. Thanks for joining us for another edition of Chosen Links. If you like what you heard, feel free to share this episode. Don't forget to like and subscribe to our YouTube channel and follow us on our socials at Boaz Hepner on X and Facebook and at Hepner.Boaz on Instagram.